across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell here between now and 1 o'clock. Thank you so much for your company this morning. It's great to have it. A very big, dramatic weekend in London because there is a huge summit, many European leaders. Zelensky is here. He was embraced by Keir Starmer yesterday, and we know that there are many other Western European leaders here. The question about what should happen in Ukraine is, of course, on the lips of many, as is reaction to what happened at the White House on Friday. That storm continues. Very interestingly, we've heard from Starmer and Kemi Badenoch this morning. She says she feels sorry for Zelensky. Starmer's view as well is that there has to be a lasting peace in Ukraine. Can he be a bridge between Starmer? Can Starmer be a bridge between Zelensky and Trump? There are some newspapers this morning as well asking whether we should cancel the state visit for President Trump. I wonder what you think about that. There's loads to talk about this morning. We're also talking about a charity that has allegedly given money directly to Hamas terrorists in the Middle East. Let me know what you think about all of that. 0344 499 1000. We also have the Shadow Foreign Secretary in the programme this morning. Priti Patel will be here. What do you think I should ask her? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, or you can send me a voice note or a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, Keir Starmer has been speaking to the BBC this morning, and he has said a couple of quite interesting things. He says that he wants lasting peace. This is what the Prime Minister said this morning.
The United Kingdom, along with France and possibly one or two others, will work with Ukraine on a plan to stop the fighting, and then we'll discuss that plan with the United States. So in those calls on Friday night, through the meeting yesterday, into the calls again last night, I think we've got a step in the right direction because, as I say, nobody wants to see what happened on Friday, but it's really important that we keep our central focus, which is lasting peace in Ukraine. Nobody wants any more bloodshed.
That's Keir Starmer speaking to the BBC earlier today. He had something else to say as well. Let's hear this.
Well, I'm clear in my mind that he wants a lasting peace. That comes from my discussions with him on Thursday. We had extensive discussions. I've obviously met him before that, back in September in New York, and I've talked to him a number of times on the phone, including Friday night and Saturday night. So my strong view is that he wants a lasting peace, and I agree with him about that. President Zelensky agrees with him about that, and I think nobody wants this conflict to go on, least of all the Ukrainians. It's not in our national interest.
So very interesting thoughts from Keir Starmer there today, avoiding the question certainly in that interview really about whose side he's on necessarily. We asked that question yesterday, and if you want to give me your thoughts on it today about Zelensky versus Trump, but I think the debate has moved on a little bit. The Mail on Sunday is asking the question about the state visit. That's something that people might want to comment on. I wonder whether that is something that's realistically going to happen, whether the state visit for Trump is going to be cancelled, but let me know your thoughts on that. Certainly the big summit that's happening today, I think we're probably going to hear from Keir Starmer later today. There'll be a debate or at least a statement in Parliament tomorrow, ostensibly, I would imagine, about the summit that's happening today and the Western European leaders who are there. I suppose the question is, what happens next? We saw that Rachel Reeves has earmarked over £2 billion for Ukraine. Certainly that deal has now been signed as well with Zelensky. Let's get to all of these topics, not just with you, 0344 499 1000, but also with Lettuce Bromovsky, who's a journalist at the Mail Online. Hello there, Lettuce, and Matthew Torbett, who's a political commentator. Great to be with you both this morning on the debate desk. Matthew, maybe I could start with you, your impressions of the last few days and what you think needs to be discussed at the summit today.
For the last few days, it's hard to sum up in words. I think Keir Starmer, showed To his credit, he looked good diplomatically. I think the optics were good. I think it's important to not get dragged down, you know, with just the optics, because he didn't get any assurances. There was no assurances on the tariffs that may go on the UK. There was no assurances with regards to security backstops with regards to the US. However, diplomats, I've always felt, are people that are paid very well to lie for their country, and he did all right out of it. You know, he looked all right. You compare that
not
with...
always the case with diplomats, it must be said. Slightly cynical view there, Matthew, perhaps. Yeah.
But I think Zelensky, I felt for him. He is a man who is, you know, no doubt perpetually exhausted and probably doesn't sleep very much at night. Has allowed J.D. Vance, as chief arsonist in the Oval Office, to sort of niggle him with comments with regards to Ukraine and Russia when, you know, J.D. Vance has never visited Ukraine.
Also largely false comments that he made in the Oval Office.
Well, let's talk about that, Lettuce, because, I mean, we're still reacting 2 days on to what happened in the Oval Office. I want to talk about what's happening in London today as well, but we'll get to that. Give me your thoughts on the Oval Office.
I mean, the Oval Office was the most horrifying, sort of toe-curling incident that we saw, and from my perspective, it really just looked like two men bullying one man who, as you said, has been on the front lines, and over very petty things like picking up on why he was wearing his military attire and not wearing a suit. You know, he's wearing that military attire as a symbolism for he won't change until the war ends. It's him making a stand on something symbolically. But then there was other things about, you know, they parroted the line again that the US has put £300 billion into Ukraine. That is not true. They've put around £100 billion into Ukraine. They were sort of saying other Putin propaganda lines around Ukraine having to take people from their villages and force them onto the front lines because they don't want to be there.
There is some evidence that has happened. I mean, Trump certainly is a man of his own mind. Do you think he's just a pawn of Putin? Isn't that too simplistic a way of putting it?
No, I don't think he's a pawn of Putin, but I do think he's a utilitarian to the core. He focuses solely on outcomes, and any peace deal that he's trying to negotiate here, he's not negotiating for Ukraine, he's negotiating for the US, he's negotiating for himself.
OK, it's interesting now we have Zelensky in the UK. Matthew, we saw him arrive at Stansted Airport around this time yesterday, and this huge big summit that's happening with Western European leaders this morning. And we saw really Starmer embrace him, see him on Downing Street. We didn't see Starmer tweeting something out. The Sunday Times is saying that is something that Starmer just says is silly, and a number of European leaders did it, though. We saw Olaf Scholz do it in Germany. We saw Ursula von der Leyen write on Twitter as well. But Starmer, that's sort of not his style. In terms of what he has actually said, well, actually, it's a very, very interesting thing today, what he's told the BBC, but also his embracing of Zelensky and saying he stands not just with Ukraine, but with Zelensky himself.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as you know, I'm a big critic of Starmer at times from within the Labour Party. I thought he showed great leadership, and actually I'd go as far as saying, which, without sounding melodramatic, I felt quite proud to be British yesterday after the shameful scenes. It was deeply unedifying and uncomfortable what we saw in the Oval Office with Zelensky and Trump and Vance, and I thought, yeah, we're on the right side at this point. You know, this is, and actually, I think going back to the fact that Zelensky's no doubt exhausted after 3 years of this, I thought at one point he looked quite emotional. I think it's probably been an awful week for him because he's going into this because he's flown all the way to Washington because I think he can feel this slipping away, and by this I mean American support for Ukraine in this war. And the Ukrainian people will have had hope for this meeting. They're hoping there will become a ceasefire or peace or whatever else may come from it. And it's been dashed. It's almost like that carrot is being dangled and taken away from him. So I felt proud. I think he has shown good leadership. I think also, you know, I'm actually really glad for once a leading politician hasn't listened to Twitter and people saying, oh, put a tweet out, you know, this sort of, I dislike the term virtue signalling, but, you know, it does nothing. And I think real leadership was him getting on the phones that evening and trying to act as a real sort of bridge between Zelensky and Trump, which I think is exactly the right thing to do.
We've got some breaking news here. Israel says it is stopping all goods and supplies into Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office claims Hamas is refusing to accept the Witkoff outline. That is Steve Witkoff, who is the US envoy to the special envoy to the Middle East. He says that Hamas is refusing to accept the Witkoff outline for continuing the talks which Israel agreed to. Israel said in a statement, Mr. Netanyahu decided that starting this morning, all entry of goods and supplies into the Gaza Strip would cease. It added, Israel will not allow a ceasefire without the release of our hostages. If Hamas continues its refusal, there will be further consequences. We're just getting that news in. Israel says it is stopping all goods and supplies into Gaza. Lettuce, what do you think of that? We're just reacting to this news here today. What do you make of this?
That's very sort of depressing and sad to hear, considering over these past month or so we've had really the ceasefire, the exchange of hostages, things were moving in the right direction. Obviously at times it's been incredibly volatile and seems like it could have broken down at any moment, but to hear that this is happening now, when just last night we were reporting that, you know, they were going to extend the ceasefire over Ramadan and over the Jewish holiday of Passover, this is depressing news to hear.
Matthew?
What do you say? This has gone on, you know, far longer than the Russia-Ukraine war with regards to things like that. What does he want? What does he want in this? You know, it seemed like the ceasefire was built on sand in a way, and anything could give at any point. Benjamin Netanyahu.
Well, he wants the release of the hostages. He wants peace in the Middle East. I mean,
I don't know if he does want peace in the Middle East. I was very fortunate to go to both Israel and Palestine 2 months before October the 7th, and I met as part of a cross-party delegation with leaders on both sides in the occupied territories, in the West Bank, in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. And the one thing I came away from that visit with, it opened my eyes massively, is that nobody on any side, normal people, civilians, want anything to do with any of this. And what it always seems to be over many generations is weak leaders blaming the other side.
Netanyahu is many things, but he is not a weak leader.
I don't know. I think he's got to pander to the far right in his coalition to stay in. He's got Itamar Ben-Gvir up his backside trying to ensure that, I mean, his views are very well known on Palestinians. I would say he has been a weak leader, and actually for someone who's actually surprisingly quite a moderate, has been couched and pushed into a corner to almost become, I wouldn't go as far right, but not far off in some of the stuff he espouses. It's shameful, really.
OK, we're reacting to that news that Israel is stopping all goods and supplies into Gaza. That is the latest. We'll cover that throughout the programme, as we'll talk about Trump and Vance and Zelensky and Starmer. Lots of people getting in touch this morning, and thank you for doing so. Vincent says, hi Peter, so the grifter Zelensky is told what people really think and it upsets him. He's supposed to be this great war leader. I'm sure he can get over the hearty words. Anyway, he seemed to be grinning yesterday when Reeves handed another 2.6 billion of our taxes. Well, what do you think about that? Should we have given 2.6 billion to Ukraine? Is that a good use of taxpayers' money here in the UK? Julie says, hello Peter, regarding the topic about whether the state visit of Donald Trump should be cancelled, I would say yes, it should, and he and his sidekick Vance bullied Zelensky last Friday. It was a setup, says Julie. Lorraine says, the king, sadly unlike the queen, doesn't remain neutral in politics. We have witnessed his interference before. Using the state visit card was just sickening. Trump is not stupid and would know it was buttering up exercise. A state visit should be a celebration and not a political pawn. So in this case, I feel it must be redacted, changed due to the way and reasons that it was used. I would have voted for Trump, but what I witnessed in the Oval Office was absolutely deplorable, and we should never condone bullying from anyone. Let's just remind ourselves what happened in the Oval Office on Friday. There's obviously these scenes have been repeated quite a lot, but if people perhaps just want to remind themselves of what a dramatic day it was, not even 48 hours ago, and of course the huge implications are continuing here in London today.
From the very beginning of the war, we've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
you
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment,
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
Yes. What about West
if
Bank?
you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me-
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin, in 3 days.
Well, that was what happened in the White House over the weekend. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Keith in Durham, who says it was blatantly obvious Trump's main priority for meeting President Zelensky on Friday was to secure a deal on minerals in Ukraine. Trump trying to get President Zelensky to agree to a peace deal was secondary. I think the king should cancel the state visit offered to Trump for his appalling behaviour towards President Zelensky. Penny in Essex says, thank goodness Zelensky got a warm welcome from Starmer. I wonder how Starmer would have reacted had he been on the end of that disgusting bullying from Trump and his sidekick. I was all for Trump and delighted Biden and Harris are both gone, but I think Trump has become slightly unhinged. Of course, the invite by our king is a big draw to Trump and America, says Penny. Danny, also in Essex, says, Kemi Badenoch is getting it hopelessly wrong. Again, Reform voters will not be on the side of Zelensky and continue to fund a war, and if Starmer gets his wish to provide white working class boys for the Ukraine meat grinder. Amanda in London, Trump's state visits should certainly not be cancelled. Tit for tat doesn't get us anywhere with people like Trump. Barry says more billions to Ukraine to fund a war they cannot win. Charity should begin at home. Matthew, we have lots of divided opinion really on lots of things in terms of what happened on Friday, and in terms of the money that we have given to Ukraine just in the last 24 hours or so. What do you make of those comments, and what do you make of those issues?
I think there's always going to be divided opinion. I remember about a year into the war, and there was billions and billions of these huge amounts of money that people are hearing. And I wondered when Ukraine fatigue would sort of set in, because people are arguably feeling the worst off they felt in many, many years in this country. And at points it can feel like, well, why are we helping other countries when, I'm on my uppers at the moment? I suppose the argument to that is, what price would you put on safety? Because I would say this doesn't just affect Ukraine. The Danish secret services have been very vocal in the sense of if Putin spies a weakness in NATO, he will go away and regroup, and will likely not just go for Ukraine next time, he will try to invade further parts of Europe. That is potentially Belarus, that is potentially Poland. And where does it stop? Because the other thing about war is we talk a lot about bullets and bombs that we're sending countries. War's moved on a lot. We're obviously now in a nuclear age, but also we're in an era of cyber security and biochemical weapons, both of which Russia have used on our soil. When you look at potential attacks to the NHS, and we never really got to the bottom of who that was about 7 years ago.
Well, they poisoned various people. Alexander Litvinenko, the Skripals, for example, led us a lot to talk about this morning, and I wonder, just in regard to all of this, is Starmer at the risk of choosing sides in this? Maybe he has already. Maybe his embrace of Zelensky was that, or also could he be a bridge between the two? Because we've had other leaders as well saying that Zelensky, Mark Rutte, for example, the head of NATO, says, speaking of talking to Zelensky, he said, I think you have to find a way, dear Vladimir, to restore your relationship with Donald Trump and the American administration. That is important.
Yeah, definitely. And that is important. And that's something that Starmer has also said, Macron's also said to Zelensky and to Trump when they've had their phone calls with them, that people, they need to come back to the table. I think there's a lot of pressure that Zelensky has to come back to the table, but I think you should also look at this at Trump's perspective. He needs this deal to go through in terms of the minerals. He's made promises, one to the American people, that he'll get back this money that they've spent in Ukraine, and really the only way to do that is if he gets control of these minerals in this region. If that deal doesn't go through, there is a likelihood that Russia will control that region and America will see nothing. On top of that, he, like I was saying earlier, is based on outcomes. He made promises when he was coming into power to end the wars, and he wants to take whatever credit he can to end these wars, whether that's in Israel, whether that's in Ukraine. If he can't create this peace deal, no matter how short it might be, no matter how forced it might be, he won't have come through on that promise.
Thank you both. We'll come back to this. We'll also speak to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel. We'll get more of your thoughts and questions as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call on any of the big topics that are around today. I'd also just very briefly like to say hello to Kevin at Belfast International Airport, who helped me the other day, keeping us all safe. Jenny Strawbridge is someone I met this week as well, came up to me and said hello. And it is Natasha, who is one of our key key watchers and listeners in Switzerland, who is 41 today. So just a few little messages to those people as well, and a couple more of your messages that are coming in. Leslie says, Starmer's toe-curling hug with Zelensky, did he say the naughty man in the US shouted at you? And Brad in Cambridge, who would have thought that it would be Donald Trump who would be Starmer's route out of all the mess he has caused in Britain? Although Starmer isn't really having an impact on any of the Ukraine situation, he's been given the opportunity to give the impression that he is. Very interesting perspective. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, lots of reaction to everything that's going on this weekend. We're on the debate desk with Matthew Torbett and Lettuce Bramowski, who are political commentators. Both Lettuce is with the Mail Online. I want to ask you actually about the Mail in a second. But first of all, I want to play a voice note. This is from Anna in Surrey.
Morning, Peter. Anna, Surrey. You've sent my blood pressure up just as I walk into work. No, we do not cancel Trump's state meeting. This cretin lodging in Downing Street can't resolve rubber dinghies. We are dying as a country. Our culture is under threat. We cannot resolve Ukraine. We cannot resolve the UK. Hand it over to Trump. We do not have the manpower, the resources, nor the spine with the collective group of liberals that unfortunately run Europe. Remember also, we are no longer part of Europe. No, no, no. Resolve our own country, please, Sir Starmer, if you're capable, which I seriously doubt. Have a good day, Peter. Bye-bye.
Anna, I hope you have a good day. You certainly have a strong opinion on there. Handed to Trump. Very interestingly, the Mail on Sunday says, now stop the state visit for bully Trump amid outrage over the US president's humiliation of Zelensky. And as the King hosts Ukraine leader at Sandringham today, the MPs and top brass are demanding this. Well, Marion County Down says the King received the Emir of Qatar in December. Qatar hosts and has provided financial support to Hamas. It hosted Taliban leaders. The late Queen received the Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Why on earth would Britain cancel Trump? This is an utterly daft suggestion. Well, let us, I'm sure you're not responsible for every single word that is in the Mail, but what is your reaction to this?
I mean, I'm definitely glad that the Mail's come out strong on this view that, you know, what happened in the Oval Office has outraged millions of people and quite literally sent shockwaves around. Whether it would be a realistic option to cancel the state visit at this point, whether that would be playing too much into Trump's game, I'm not too sure. Also, I think Trump himself will be frustrated enough in his own terms that Zelensky is seeing the King later on today. Although it's not a state visit, he will be riled at the fact that...
And that didn't seem... I'm not quite sure of the choreography of this, but this didn't seem to be planned. It seemed to be a reaction to what's happening with Trump. Maybe it was on the cards and it wasn't announced because they obviously don't say what visiting dignitaries do in their diary most of the time anyway. They don't say what the King does. What's your impression of this, Matthew? The fact that the King is meeting Zelensky, to me that is a strong statement, no matter when the plan was for them to meet.
Yeah, I think in context it felt like a reaction and more of a show of solidarity with Zelensky more than something that was pre-planned. I mean, we don't know, but that's the way I took it. I think with regards to the state visit, I wouldn't cancel it, actually. I think what I would do is put it on ice. I read this morning the Trump team...
But the Emir of Qatar, Xi Jinping, there are lots of unpleasant people we bring. I mean, Donald Trump is an ally. America is our closest ally.
And I agree. What I would do is, informally, this is contingent on us getting peace. This is a celebration. The King would like to invite you to celebrate a lasting peace in Russia and Ukraine. The Trump team are keen to get it over the line. They want it this summer. I believe the King and Number 10 were hoping it would be 2026. If they can stick to that timeline and say we need a deal by then, that would be good.
Let's hear what Claire has to say. Morning, Peter. So it's all about taking sides with Starmer and Kemi. Starmer, the harmer, is the last person to build a bridge between Putin and Zelensky. He can't even build a bridge between the so-called far right and his regime. Starmer is no diplomat. He's a pathetic figure. He has no principles and will take sides depending on which way the wind and human rights debate goes. Tell us what you really think, Claire. We heard from Anna as well saying hand it over to Trump, hand over the country, hand over the running of the country to Trump. Can you understand why that level of opinion is there, Anna? As we heard in the voice note there a minute ago, clearly very angry with what's gone on in the last 48 hours and beyond, Lettuce.
Clearly very angry about what's gone on. And the only thing I will say to Trump, and in that sort of anger that is being reflected in some citizens here in the UK, is that UK and Europe for years has been underfunding our defence programmes. And we have been sitting back and we've been hanging on the coattails of the US, who have been continually funding, their defence spending where we haven't. In fact, within the NATO allies, only 3 countries have actually met their defence spending: UK, the US, and funnily enough, Greece. So there is a bit of frustration there where we really need to fix up, and hopefully the summit that we'll see later today will see people start pledging some money, because it's actually long overdue and we've been in denial about this war that's going on in our backyard. Interestingly though, a lot of people will say, actually, is that too much money? Is that should some of the money stay here in the UK? What about the 1.4 billion it would take to sort winter fuel allowances, for example? It's a huge amount of money, but I think it's naive to think that this problem that's going on in Ukraine won't continue and expand into the rest of Europe. We already saw what happened in... I mean, it hasn't so far. We've only... Russia is only occupying a fifth of Ukraine at the moment. It only ever has. Yes, apart from the feint that they sent, military term, to Kyiv, they haven't taken over any of the rest. I mean, this kind of contagion idea, I just think is nonsense. I don't think it's nonsense at all. Look at 2014, they invaded Crimea and Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons under the guise of protection from the US, the UK and from Russia, that they could trust them. Yeah, it was. 20 years previously. But it doesn't matter how long this takes. Russia will continue to chip away at parts of Europe, as it might do if it manages to annex parts of Ukraine, as we've heard from intelligence services that it's looking to potentially invade Belarus next. I actually think what's interesting today... They don't have the resources, they don't have the people, they don't have the military. But give them 10 years and they might be able to rebuild up those resources matters, and in 10 years' time, we might be experiencing this again. I really believe that what we're seeing right now is appeasement, similar to what we saw in 1938 back in Europe. What I was going to say is what I think is interesting today is the Baltic states have not been invited to the summit that's happening later.
Yep.
And considering that Starmer has been saying time and time again, you know, Ukraine has to be involved in these conversations, it's involved in the war. Yes, it is. But I think many would argue that the Baltic states being so close on the edge of that should also be included in these discussions.
OK, hold that thought, Matthew. We'll come back to you in just a second. We'll also hear what Kemi Badenoch has been saying on the media today. And in just a few minutes, we'll speak to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel, as well. Lots to come. Want your reaction as well. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Mark says the Queen met Martin McGuinness. If the King cannot beat Trump, then our nation has gone to the dogs, the Liberal dogs. Leslie says, will Lammy want the Trump invitation to be cancelled? Given a few of his comments previously, although he's changed his tune, as has Trump, in fairness. Anna for Prime Minister, says Mark in Norwich. We all love her. Get the cretin out of Downing Street and get Anna into Downing Street. Morning, Peter, says Claire Starmer is nailing his colours to the mast by giving Ukraine money pledges now, at this time of all times. Now, this smarmy, grovelling episode with Trump shows him for what he is. A nobody and a whitewash and a two-face. Expecting Starmer to be a bridge builder is ludicrous. He can't even build bridges with his own people in his own country. Lots to discuss today. We'll come back to the debate desk with Matthew and Lettuce in just a second, but let's hear what Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives, has been saying this morning on the BBC about all of this.
My heart went out to President Zelensky. I watched it and I couldn't believe what was happening. He was being humiliated. I don't think we should conduct these sorts of difficult conversations in front of the cameras. And we have to remember that President Zelensky is a hero. He is the person who represents that strength and resilience of the Ukrainian people. And whatever differences and difficulties we might have during negotiations, we need to be able to set them aside when everyone's watching, because the only person who would have liked that would have been Vladimir Putin.
What do you make of what Kemi Badenoch said there, Lettuce?
I think that her comments about him, well, definitely the comments about it happening in front of a camera, I do agree that it shouldn't have happened in front of a camera, that debate. I think her comments on him being a hero, I would say that's largely true for Ukrainian people. His popularity and polls rating there is still sitting around the 70%, 60% mark. I think to be calling him a hero...
I think it was 57% in the last poll that I saw, so a little bit lower, but certainly not as low as Donald Trump said. He said 4%.
Definitely. But I think that, you know, he definitely got a hero's welcome, actually. actually, I'll say when he arrived at Downing Street yesterday, I think the large number of the British public wouldn't necessarily call him a hero, but they would respect him as a war leader.
Matthew, Kemi Badenoch seems to be singing off roughly the same hymn sheet, going a little bit further perhaps than Keir Starmer, saying her heart went out to Zelensky. Is she using her position in order to do that? I mean, she's not the Prime Minister. She can say things that he can't really. Yes, and that's exactly what I think it is. It's good politics. She is recognising, unlike some in the Conservatives, and it's only some, that Donald Trump is politically toxic, I would say, for people in this country. He's an unpopular politician in this country. I think the only person that's less popular out the American government is Elon Musk, you know, so it's tough going. But she can use that because, you know, the likelihood is there's not going to be an election for another 4 years, 5 years. He will be gone by the time Kemi gets in, if she does get in. So she's got a little bit more wiggle room in a way that Starmer hasn't. So she's right to do so, yeah. It was interesting what Lettuce was saying just before the break there about the Baltic states not being involved in this huge summit, a very important summit today, crucial actually in regard to US relations with a number of those countries, including obviously Ukraine, but I would say probably the UK as well. What do you make of the fact the Baltic states have been excluded from this, Matthew? Yeah, I'm not sure why. It'd be good to understand why, and I think actually the one thing we never seem to talk about is potentially the use of Turkey. They seem to be the great anomaly because they have the second largest army in NATO. And as we know, Erdogan is you know, fairly close to Putin and has come out in support of him on occasions. Whether he could actually be a useful bridge with regards to getting any sort of peace deal over the line and what he may want for that. But I think he's something that could be quite useful. And as we know, actually, Donald Trump has spoke of his you know, admiration of certain elected dictators in the past, like Xi Jinping and others, and I think really he would love that sort of unadulterated power. Whether he would respect Erdogan more than a Zelensky, and if he came to him with a plan. Very interesting thoughts there. We are going to speak to Priti Patel, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, in just a few minutes' time. Let me just read out a few more of your messages. They're coming in thick and fast. I want to make sure that you have your say. It's a very, very interesting one from Nick Moore, who says, "Good morning, Peter. Thank you for your constant voice of reason and balanced debate. Please could you ask Priti Patel why on earth we should listen to a word the Tories say when they are responsible for so many of the nation's woes following their futile lockdowns which destroyed our economy and their constant broken promises regarding immigration, both of which allowed this appalling Labour government in." Brenda says, "Why shouldn't Trump want the best for the United States? That is what a good leader does. I wish our so-called leader felt the same about the UK." Another person says, Chloe says, "Why this 100-year deal? Why the ceremony with Reeves? Starmer finally talks of peace today, but they can't do that without Trump. It's possible to support Ukraine whilst pursuing peace. It doesn't have to be one or the other." Ali says, "Where is Trump shouting at Netanyahu to repay money and to give Israel to Palestine, just as he's giving Ukraine to Russia? I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon." And Guy says, "I think Zelensky deserved what he got in the White House. Who does he think he is? Jumping around Europe dressed as Action Man, demanding our taxes should pay for his war." I mean, lots of strong views there, and actually in regard to the money situation as well, there's 2.6 billion that has now been pledged, a further 2.6 billion that's been pledged, and I mean, Rachel Reeves saying in the budget as well that £3 billion would be given to Ukraine every year for as long as is necessary. The financial side of this is a big one, and it can't be ignored, Matthew. No, it can't be ignored. I heard somebody, or maybe it was yourself before, saying about the winter fuel. I thought that was wrong, and actually I think you can do both. But you can't. I mean, Starmer's saying there's no money for the winter fuel allowance, but there is money for Zelensky and for Ukraine, so you can't do both. I think you can. And I think the problem, this is the problem with wartime, unfortunately. You never have a chancellor going, or a prime minister going to his chancellor, "Sorry, I haven't got any money in the budget for any bombs this month." It doesn't work like that. They will always find money for this sort of stuff. It's worth noting as well that 2.2 billion is actually from frozen Russian assets. That's so right. Therefore the Russians are therefore paying for it. I think that's a good way to sell it back to the public. We're still putting a lot of taxpayers' money into Ukraine. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And a lot of antipathy towards Starmer from our viewers and listeners, let us as well. Do you think he will come out of this well? Because he seems to be having, I mean, Thursday, how you can be as cynical as you like, Thursday went pretty well. He had a few things in his back pocket by the end of that meeting with Trump, and of course it went far better than Zelensky's meeting. And now, I mean, do you think he's showing leadership this weekend?
I mean, time will definitely tell on that statement. As you say, all the papers seem unanimous really this week that he has been doing an incredibly good job, whether that's showing up to Donald Trump, whether that's being the mediator between Zelensky and Trump. I think really now the next move is, and what he slightly showed last night actually with Zelensky, is to show that the UK can stand strong on its own. Keep America as an ally. I don't doubt that they will be important now and in the future, but that we can stand strong on our own. We forget so often that we were the first people to send the Shadow Storm missiles to Ukraine, the first people to send Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine, and then other countries followed suit. And that's the sort of leadership that we're going to need to see today at the summit, and hopefully get other people to start pledging money like the billions of pounds that Rachel Reeves signed away last night.
Rosie says, I honestly believe Zelensky had no intention of signing, and the ambush was from him, not Trump. We need to understand the history of the region going back over 300 years at best. In the last 12 or so at least, we should have a full presence in the region and manage the money we are pouring down the black hole. I feel that close scrutiny is anathema to Zelensky. Who would have thought that I've read that one out. Tracy says, as far as I know, the $2 billion we are sending is coming from the Russian money we have held. That's correct, and that point has been made. This could be a very dangerous thing to do. Gary in Edinburgh says, Ukraine cannot win unless Britain, the EU and the US back them to the hilt, and without US support, Ukraine is finished. The US cannot fight wars in the Middle East, Eastern Europe and in the Far East. Trump knows this, and Trump is not about to compromise America in the event of a face-off with China. Well, let's actually take that question and take that point from Gary, because we have seen yet more evidence over the past 24 hours from Trump, from Pete Hesketh, from others, saying that America may well withdraw its support from Ukraine. First of all, do you think that would happen? And B, what would the implications be? Let us.
I can't see that happening immediately, unless something goes wrong, unless there is another sort of explosive scene like we saw.
They've talked about it a number of times now.
They have talked about it a number of times, but to withdraw all funding completely, I think wouldn't be in the benefit of Trump, which is why I don't believe that he will go through and do that. Although there is this idea now that America is becoming much more isolationist, I believe that they're becoming more sort of sovereigntist. So they care more about the sort of trade agreements and things like that that's going on, rather than completely isolating themselves from the rest of the global world power. I think they're much more prioritised with what's going on in China. But I do think that they understand that there is a threat within Putin. I don't think Trump's so naive that he doesn't see that at all. And so I think to withdraw all funding, well, I think it would be an error, and I don't think he would do it.
Matthew?
It's hard to predict what the current lot will do. I don't think they will. I hope they won't. I think there's an argument to be made. If they don't, we're looking at tanks rolling through Kyiv. That's the way I see it. I think this has always been a largely unwinnable war for Ukraine, and I think we've almost done just enough to keep Russia at bay.
So is Trump then right to say, what does peace look like? Let's talk about peace, let's negotiate. I
think peace is always a good idea. I think it's at what cost. If your house gets burgled and it's someone I've known for years, and loads of us in the media community have known for years, and I go, I know him, we all know he's a bit of a rogue, I can make him stop. And you go, that'd be great, Matthew. Yeah, we want this to stop at all costs. Well, that's fine. Let him take what he wants, and then he can go, and then we'll call it quits. That isn't a just peace for anybody other than Vladimir Putin. I think what we've done is just enough, because I think if we got to the point where Zelensky and Ukraine were pushing back and actually entered Russian territory, there's then an argument for Putin to make to go, NATO are now waging war against Russia, and that becomes a very dangerous situation.
That's a very different thing, isn't it? We're going to break now, and after the break we're going to talk more to Matthew and to Lettuce. We're also going to talk to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel, and indeed one of her predecessors, Sir Malcolm Rifkind, is coming up at 11 o'clock, who is one of the elder statesmen of the Conservative Party and also can take a wider view of all of this. We'll get Lettuce and, of course, Matthew's view on what Priti Patel says as well. If you have any questions, any thoughts you want me to put to her, text us 87222, drop us a WhatsApp 0344 499 1000. We'll talk to Priti Patel in a few minutes' time. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Michelle, who says, I am so shocked people are taken in by this corrupt war. Just look at Zelensky's net worth. Lots of questions about this, actually. I don't know what the truth of it is, and there's lots of misinformation around on this. And, I mean, Vogue photo shoot while his people were fighting for their lives. I look forward to Elon's investigation into where the money has gone. Another very fishy forever war. David says, those on the left are happy to pay billions more to watch the continued slaughter of tens of thousands of young men and some women. Those on the right want peace. Whose side do you want to be on? And Paul says Trump has lied about European countries only loaning money while the US gave it so we can get the Americans on the side to stop a war. If Ukraine gives up 50%, I should say, of their rare minerals, you stop wars because you can, not to get paid. Trump is wrong on this. Well, we'll talk to the Shadow Foreign Secretary Priti Patel in a few minutes' time. We've got on the debate desk Matthew Torbett, who is a political commentator, and Lettuce Bromovsky, who is also a political commentator and journalist with the Mail Online as well. What should the priorities be today? What should the kind of tone be? What should the kind of question be at Lancaster House, which is bang in the centre of London, beside St James's Palace, where all these leaders are coming today? Matthew, what should how should Starmer set it out? What tone should he set?
I think there needs to be calm within those attending, and we're not going to let this unravel when we appear to be close to coming to at least a table for an agreement. And you know, one of the texters makes a good point. These are innocent people on all sides that are dying in many ways. You know, it's leaders, or certainly one leader, pushing out innocent people, and they're being led to the slaughter. And in fact, we've got other countries involved when we've got 1,000 North Korean innocent people now dead because they've signed up to be sent to the front lines in Russia. I think also it's important to show a united front. As I said earlier, the Secret Services in other countries say if there appears to be a weakness and Putin recognises that, then there's no reason why he won't come again in future, if not now. So I think one to show leadership as well. This is about the EU and Europe and NATO, I suppose, trying to look relevant in an era where America are the global superpower, and we have been riding on the coattails, as Lettuce said, for quite some time, and it's about showing no, we're here as well. We want to lead the charge along with America, not ahead of, but this is something we all want and we want to get round the table to talk about.
Lettuce?
I really hope it's going to be actions and not words after the end of this summit today, and that we'll be coming out of this not with more promises about what we might do in the future, but with real agreements that are being signed or real, hard deals that have been negotiated over, because that's what we need right now. No more words, just actions. Well,
we're going to talk to the Shadow Foreign Secretary Priti Patel in a few minutes' time, and sorry, tell me that again. Yes, we've got her now. Okay, great. The Shadow Foreign Secretary Priti Patel is with us. Priti, thank you for joining us today. I wonder.
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning. I wonder what your reaction is to Starmer's leadership in the last few days. Has he shown leadership? Do you think his reaction to what happened at the White House on Friday is the right one?
Well, of course, and we want our country to be a force for good in the world and show good leadership, and we've seen that in recent days. And of course, what we saw at the White House on Friday was not right. It was deeply distressing to see. And I say that as someone, Peter, as you know, I've been in government. I was in government at the time when Russia illegally invaded Ukraine. And we stand with Ukraine with, I have to say, with a great degree of pride. And we look at President Zelensky with such respect in the way in which he's conducted himself over what has been a terrible, terrible few years.
Tell us your thoughts on Donald Trump and what relations should be there. What message should the UK send to the person who is our closest ally?
Well, America is our closest ally, Peter, and I think I can say that with some authority, having worked very, very closely with America, keeping our own country safe, over the defence and security of our country and our citizens. But actually, even on our economic relationship, let's not forget our ties are deep. They're also enduring, and it's our two countries that work together to end the Cold War. You've asked what our message should be. Our message is one of consistency. one of working together in times of great conflict and strife. It's Britain and America that stand tall in the world and seek to find solutions to some of these enduring challenges that we're now seeing. But I think when it comes to Ukraine, Peter, let's not forget this is an illegal conflict in Ukraine. Yes, we want to see a sustainable end to all of this, a just and lasting resolution, but it is for the people of Ukraine as a sovereign country to be in control of that and to decide their own future.
When you saw, as we all did, what happened on Friday in the Oval Office, whose side were you on, Zelensky or Trump's?
Well, look, I mean, you've heard me say we stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine and President Zelensky. I felt that he was not treated with the respect and dignity that was due. And I think actually, Peter, we all need to step back now. Friday has happened. I don't think our disagreements, and I say this in gentle terms, but, you know, I've been involved in difficult discussions in the past with our friends and allies. And you have those discussions privately, never publicly. So we need to take a step back. Today is a day where our governments, the Prime Minister is convening here in London. We need to wait and see what happens with these talks and discussions. I thought yesterday we saw President Zelensky come into Downing Street, and I have to say I felt a great degree of pride in the way in which President Zelensky was greeted and treated and shown a great deal of respect by not just our government but by people actually cheering for him and, you know, demonstrating our long-standing support for Ukraine. We're at an important time, and I think, you know, our government is demonstrating good leadership on this. It's
interesting today, obviously, there is the summit. It's at Lancaster House in the centre of London. The Baltic states are not invited. If you were Foreign Secretary, would you have invited them?
So, look, the Baltic states are absolutely pivotal to everything that's gone on. I remember spending a lot of time when I was Home Secretary with them during this crisis. Look, we're not in government, and convening these meetings is always difficult. I do think it's the Baltic states, the GEF countries. You know about Operation Interflex, how we've been training troops here in the UK, but we have troops in Estonia. Bulgaria is another country that's, you know, we've worked hand in hand in. I'm sure even if not today, they will all be part of wider discussions, and they do need to be part of the discussions going forward because they put a great deal of support into Ukraine, and that's also been partly through a lot of our convening from when we were in government.
So if you were Foreign Secretary, would they be there today?
So I would be making the case for them, but look, Peter, we haven't been part of those discussions as to, you know, the guests that have come to Britain today. There have been probably extensive behind-the-scenes discussions. We don't know the reasoning for this, but, you know, it's not just about today. These discussions will be ongoing, and I have no doubt that the Baltic states, countries such as Bulgaria as well, who put a lot into the conflict and supported Ukraine, they'll also be called and be part of discussions going forward. We support that.
Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has given a lot of money yesterday from frozen Russian assets, over £2 billion, but there's a lot of taxpayers' money going to Ukraine as well. A lot of our viewers and listeners are feeling a bit fatigued about that, thinking about things like the winter fuel allowance, thinking about the problems we have in this country. Do you understand the frustration in regard to how much money is going to Ukraine, a seemingly endless conflict?
Well, I think, let me just sort of take that apart, if I may, Peter. First of all, when you're in government, you know, the choices you make, you stand by them, and to govern is to choose. I disagree fundamentally with the choices that have been made by the government around winter fuel payments and their aggressive approach to the economy and business taxes. I'll be very clear about that. On Ukraine, Ukraine is a separate matter completely. We stand by Ukraine, and at the end of the day, I was part of a government that made those choices and decisions to take actions, bring in sanctions around Russian oligarchs and other people that were cronies of President Putin. We stand by that in terms of taking away their assets, and it's right. We were part of the government. In fact, I legislated through the Economic Crime Bill, Part 1, and there's been another part of legislation around what we do with those assets. It is right that that takes place, and that should not be questioned at all. There is, however, more that can be done around those frozen assets, and what we heard yesterday, that's more long-standing long-standing work that has taken place. It actually started under previous governments. You need the legal basis when it comes to freezing assets and how you utilise that money in terms of loans. It is a loan that Rachel Reeves has put in place. We've been pressing the government to do more on that. I called for that in the week. Kemi Badenoch, our leader, has done the same. There is much more that is needed on that. And I would just make one final point, Peter, about this. At times of great conflict, we are a country that has stood up to tyranny in the past. We've had to defend ourselves in the Falklands conflict as well. It's right that we make these choices to stand by our allies. We're a member of NATO. We put resources in because at the end of the day, Ukraine's sovereignty and the fact that they are fighting for their freedom, fighting for the rule of law on the European continent also means that they're fighting for our own security as well. That's why we stand with Ukraine and why we put these resources into Ukraine. And just one final thing to say, if I may. We have, in fact, it started under the last government, we have a partnership with Ukraine. It's called a 100-year partnership. This is also about not just defence spending, but it's also about some of the economic work that takes place between our two countries, and we must continue that.
Just finally, Priti, we have the King today meeting Zelensky. That seems to have not been perhaps planned, although we don't know the full reasoning or thoughts behind that. Also a suggestion from the Mail on Sunday that the state visit should be cancelled. I wonder if you think the King is being brought into politics, and I also wonder whether you think the state visit for Donald Trump should go ahead.
So first of all, I think, His Majesty has met President Zelensky previously. I think it is wonderful, actually, and, it demonstrates the strength and depth of feeling of our country towards Ukraine and to President Zelensky. And I think it's a very dignified thing to do while President Zelensky is here. It's a great honour that's bestowed to him as well. You've asked me about the state visit. I think people, newspapers, individuals will have their own views. His Majesty has given a very gracious invitation to the President of the United States. He's done that on the basis that he recognises and knows that America is a deep ally of ours. You've heard me say I've had to work with America during, on some really difficult things that I can't even speak about, Peter. The depth of our relationship, not only is it historic, but it's a practical one on a day-to-day basis. They are our #1 ally, and that visit will not happen immediately, but it shows the extent to which, we are solid, we are consistent allies, and we should always work together to make state visits, support His Majesty in these endeavours to make these visits a success.
Priti Patel, Shadow Foreign Secretary, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Talk. Quick thought from Matthew and from Lettuce on that interview. Matthew first.
I don't think I disagreed with a single word that Priti Patel said, so I don't know whether to say welcome to Comrade Patel or go and sit down in a dark room. But I thought that was sensible, grown up, the right tone, and yeah, very good. Very good.
Can I say one thing that I thought was very refreshing was she was actually complimenting the leadership of the Labour Party in this, and for years all we hear is them going at it constantly, tearing each other down, and sometimes I believe they do it for the sake of tearing each other down.
Yes.
So actually her saying that right there felt quite good, felt quite refreshing.
Lettuce Bramowski and Matthew Torba, political commentators, both Lettuces with the Mail. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get reaction as well from Sir Malcolm Rifkind. He is the Shadow Foreign Secretary. He's coming up in just a minute here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, it's just gone 11 o'clock. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell, here until 1 o'clock. Loads to talk about this morning, including the big summit that is happening in London today, after, not even 48 hours after that astonishing scene in the Oval Office. President Zelensky and President Trump, we've heard all about it. We're still reacting to it. People still sending us your thoughts, and if you want to talk about it, that's great, because it's my show, but it's your show too. We're looking ahead a little bit as well. We've got the former Foreign Secretary, Sir Malcolm Rifkind, with us in a second to see not just reaction to Friday, but also what Keir Starmer should do now. How can he be a bridge, a leader? Priti Patel, actually, the shadow Foreign Secretary, says he is a leader, says he's shown leadership, a lot of consensus really between many political parties in terms of the UK being a force to try to get some sort of resolution to the many problems there are, not just in Ukraine, but between Ukraine and the United States, which of course has been a huge backer of theirs over the last 3 years. Lots to discuss today, including about Hamas, a UK charity accused of helping fund Hamas terrorists. We'll get into that as well. We'll talk about Keir Starmer, his leadership style. We'll also talk about what you want to talk about. There are many people getting in touch about the state visit as well, whether that should be cancelled. I personally don't think it should. There are many good points that have been made in regard to the Emir of Qatar has come. The Queen shook hands with Martin McGuinness. Is it really that big a deal? Well, one paper, the Mail on Sunday, says it is. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell on Twitter. You can also send me a voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring 0344 499 1000. Stay with me here on Talk between now and 1 o'clock. Well, let's speak to the former Foreign Secretary, Sir Malcolm Rifkind, who joins me now. Sir Malcolm, thank you for taking the time this morning. I wonder if you think that, I want to go through three separate leaders with you, and perhaps you'd give me your thoughts on each. Have these people provided leadership over the last few days? Trump, Zelensky, Starmer?
Well, I think President Zelensky has been providing extraordinary leadership over 3 years, never mind in the last few days. I think what we saw, now obviously you're referring to the spat, the very terrible events in the White House, and I think both Trump and Zelensky share responsibility for what happened. You should not have two presidents in view of the world's cameras shouting at each other and not even allowing each other to speak their mind. And Trump should have known better. He was the host. And I think the way that the vice president unnecessarily intervened, Trump does not need the vice president to intervene. That was a deliberate provocation, and by the vice president, who seems to be a rather unsavory character.
Does Zelensky hold some form of responsibility for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think he did. Yes, I think given the importance of what was happening, even if President Trump and the vice president were behaving in a provocative way, he should have kept his cool. He should not have started a shouting match with Trump, because that doesn't work. And it looked awful to the world as a whole. So I think all three of them were responsible in terms of the style of the event. But you've got to realize that of all the people under pressure, Zelensky is by far in the most vulnerable situation. That extraordinary man has for 3 years led Ukraine and kept control of 80% of the country, which Putin has been unable to conquer. Now, that has been an enormous strain for him, absolutely terrible. And yet he has kept his dignity. So I'm afraid he did lose his cool at that particular meeting. That was unfortunate. But so did the President of the United States, who ought to know better.
Do you think, I mean, those were words, but they were also words that had huge implications. Speaking of actions, do you think the United States will withdraw some, if not all, military support from Ukraine? Because that presumably, in your opinion, although I don't want to put words in your mouth, would be catastrophic.
Well, that is certainly a possibility. I think it's unlikely, and it's unlikely for there's various reasons I could give you, but there's one more important than all the others. Not only has Zelensky got himself in a very deep problem, so has Donald Trump. Because if this whole deal collapses and cannot be resurrected in a civilized fashion in the next few days or the next week or so, Trump totally fails to get the resolution with Putin that he promised from the moment he became president. This is his biggest initiative. He believes he can deliver a ceasefire or a solution of the Ukrainian war. Now, to do that, he can't just reach an agreement with Putin. That agreement has got to actually mean that Ukraine, which is the other country fighting, stops fighting. And if it refuses to do so because the terms on which Putin and Trump have reached an agreement are unacceptable to Ukraine, then it's not just Zelensky who's in a terrible situation. Trump is in as serious a one, albeit of a different kind.
I just want
to... Unless he's totally irrational, that is why it's very interesting, actually, the remarks he made after the end of the evening. He didn't say to Zelensky, you will not be welcome in the White House again. He actually, even then, was choosing slightly more careful words. You won't need to come back until you commit yourself to peace.
Yes.
Well, that's the phrase he used. That's terribly easy for anyone to commit themselves to peace. It's what the point, the issues between them are not just a commitment to peace, but whether Ukraine will have the protection it requires from Putin, who has twice ignored ceasefires and started invasions of Ukraine over the last few years.
Let's hear what the Prime Minister has been saying this morning to the BBC in regard to a lasting peace in Ukraine. This is what the Prime Minister has said.
Well, I'm clear in my mind that he wants a lasting peace. That comes from my discussions with him on Thursday. We had extensive discussions. I've obviously met him before that, back in September in New York, and I've talked to him a number of times on the phone, including Friday night and Saturday night. So my strong view is that he wants a lasting peace, and I agree with him about that. President Zelensky agrees with him about that, and I think nobody wants this conflict to go on, least of all the Ukrainians. It's not in our national interest.
And of course, this morning, the UK, France and Ukraine are all saying they want a plan to stop the fighting. I wonder what you make of what Sir Keir Starmer said there, Sir Malcolm, and about his leadership over the last few days, if you think he has, in fact, been a good leader.
Yes, no question about that. Keir Starmer has got this exactly right, and so have all the European governments. But Starmer has been in the front line because of his meeting with Trump and because he's hosting the talks today, so all credit to him for that. But if we can go just beyond that to what was being said a few moments ago, the issue is not whether Trump wants a lasting peace. Of course he does. Why shouldn't he? Everyone would like a lasting peace. But it's whether on the basis it would be lasting. And the issue that has to be resolved is an entirely reasonable point that Zelensky has had to keep raising. He said it's all very well having a ceasefire, but we've had two major ceasefires in the last 10 years, which were then subsequently led to further invasion of Ukraine by Trump. The first time was when he annexed Crimea and parts of the Donbass, and that led to an agreement, a ceasefire, and he promised he would never do anything like that again. And then a second time, it was 3 years ago, when there was a full-bodied invasion of Ukraine, which continues to this day.
So should we...
Against that background, it's not just what Putin says, because he cannot be believed by his own record in Ukraine.
So should we negotiate with him at all? Should the Americans negotiate with him? But if you can't believe him, then how can you trust him in any way?
No. The issue is not whether we negotiate with them. It's whether the content of any conclusion, if you have a successful negotiation, it has to be enforceable. And and as Trump has chosen to be the negotiator, he wasn't invited to be. In a normal situation, it would be Ukraine and Russia that were having the negotiation. But Trump has chosen to take on that role, and therefore he has an obligation to answer the question, what would America do if there was a ceasefire, if Ukraine accepted a ceasefire, and then a year or 18 months or 2 years later, Russia suddenly sent its army into Ukraine again? Would Trump just say, oh, that's very sad, that shouldn't have happened? You know, what a pity. The point that the Ukrainians are entitled to say is America is the greatest power in the world. It is leading these negotiations by its own choice. What would America do? If after a ceasefire had been in effect for some months or a year or so, Russia invaded Ukraine again? And so far, Trump has totally refused to answer that question. He's made a rather meaningless comment, well, if we were already economically involved in Ukraine, because of the rare earths issue, he implied that somehow that would stop Putin invading. Absolutely absurd point, and he knows that.
I spoke to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Dame Priti Patel, a few minutes ago. Let's just remind ourselves of what she said, and then I'll get Sir Malcolm's reaction to that.
You've asked what our message should be. Our message is one of consistency, one of working together in times of great conflict and strife. It's Britain and America that stand tall in the world and seek to find solutions to some of these enduring challenges that we're now seeing. But I think when it comes to Ukraine, Peter, let's not forget this is an illegal conflict in Ukraine. Yes, we want to see a sustainable end to all of this, a just and lasting resolution. But it is for the people of Ukraine as a sovereign country to be in control of that and to decide their own future.
Sir Malcolm, what do you make of what Priti Patel said there?
I agree with everything Priti Patel says, but of course the issue is how that is realised, what actually now happens, and what does President Trump have to do to contribute to getting the conclusion that he wants to get. And all that people are saying who are being rather critical of him is that he is refusing to say what America would do if Russia, having got a deal, having seen it implemented, then started the third war in Ukraine that Ukraine would have seen in the last 10 years. Now, that is not unreasonable. And if Trump refuses to respond to that, which so far he has refused to respond to it, then that casts doubt as to whether this is a deal worth having.
And whether it's enforceable. Yeah.
And that is why Zelensky and Ukraine are being so concerned. And not just, this also applies to the United Kingdom, to France, to Germany, to Poland, to all the other European countries. So this is not an invented problem. It's not Zelensky being difficult. It is based on Ukraine's own experience, not once, but twice, with Putin. In the last 10 years, would there be a third invasion of Ukraine, and America would just sit back and say it's nothing to do with us?
Okay, Sir Malcolm Rifkin, former Foreign Secretary, thank you for joining us on Talk this morning. Paul's been in touch on WhatsApp messages, says, let's remember Zelensky wasn't in the US to ask for money. He was there to pay for Trump's help stopping the war and a promise of long-term security with 50% of their rare mineral deposits. Well, it's interesting, Paul, there are thoughts anyway reporting, and it appears to be accurate, that Zelensky refused to sign the rare earth minerals deal again for a third time, and that was what part of why the White House was so frustrated. It's hard to know exactly what was going on, but certainly that has been reported. Darren in Bristol says, I really hope Zelensky and the Ukrainian people understand British pensioners have died this winter from the cold in order for Starmer to give this money extra billions down the pan, says Darren. George says, I must be watching a different reality to everyone else. Starmer still looks weak. We're giving away already depleted weapon stock and we can't defend our own borders. Whatever Trump's motive, mineral rights, he is trying to stop the killing, which is a good thing. A break in hostilities enables the West, as well as Russia, to assess and rearm too, and Zelensky is no angel either. David says, this is Matthew Torbett, who was on a little bit earlier on our debate desk. Matthew says, peace at what cost? Well, it will potentially save hundreds of thousands of young lives. The cost might be conceding some land to Russia, but once peace is established, then future generations might be able to reclaim that lost territory through peaceful dialogue. After all, Putin won't be around forever. Thanks for remaining balanced, Peter. Please can we remember realpolitik in this discussion, says this texter. Who is advocating peace and who wants more war? Who will pay with their lives? 2 weeks ago, the UK was worried about gilt yields. We're facing economic ruin, perhaps why Starmer and the EU want more war. Well, there's an awful lot of reaction and far more messages coming in and lots of calls coming in too. 0344 499 1000. I'm going to take some calls after the break. If you want to get your voice on the air, use the break, make the call, ring that number 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss. We're also going to discuss about foreign national offenders who could be deported quicker thanks to a new government spending programme, although it's only £5 million, and a UK charity accused of helping to fund Hamas terrorists. Loads to come between now and 1. Your views next.
if you'd have turned down the sound...
You're a terrorist sympathiser. That's great to know.
I'm not a terrorist sympathiser in any way, state or form. But if you turned down the sound and looked at the images that were being shown to you,
you'd have noticed the terrible continuity.
No, it wouldn't.
The fact that the kid had a different haircut in every scene,
different
clothes. It was an amateur-hour production.
It wouldn't have been propaganda. I've watched quite a few.
Come on, Simon, you cannot defend this. The BBC has really ballsed up it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Giorgia Meloni, who is the Italian Prime Minister, she's just arrived at Downing Street with Keir Starmer. He's welcoming various leaders, including President Zelensky, and of course he has been talking about lasting peace. He spoke to the BBC this morning. We'll look at that in a second, but you can see, if you're watching on the screen right now, Giorgia Meloni embracing Keir Starmer, shaking his hand. He's bringing her into Downing Street for talks. The Italians, of course, will play a crucial role in the summit later on today, and indeed supporting Ukraine. Let's just remind ourselves what the Prime Minister said a little bit earlier on today to the BBC.
Well, I'm clear in my mind that he wants a lasting peace. That comes from my discussions with him on Thursday. We had extensive discussions. I've obviously met him before that, back in September in New York, and I've talked to him a number of times on the phone, including Friday night and Saturday night. So my strong view is that he wants a lasting peace, and I agree with him about that. President Zelensky agrees with him about that, and I think nobody wants this conflict to go on, least of all the Ukrainians. It's not in our national interest.
Lots of people getting in touch about all of that. I also spoke to Dame Priti Patel, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, a little bit earlier on. This is what she had to say here on Talk.
You've asked what our message should be. Our message is one of consistency, one of working together in times of great conflict and strife. It's Britain and America that stand tall in the world and seek to find solutions to some of these enduring challenges that we're now seeing. But I think when it comes to Ukraine, Peter, let's not forget this is an illegal conflict in Ukraine. Yes, we want to see a sustainable end to all of this, a just and lasting resolution. But it is for the people of Ukraine as a sovereign country to be in control of that and to decide their own future.
Lots of people reacting to that interview. Tony says you should have asked her who ran the army into the ground in the first place. Sharon says Trump has a right to ask for payback from Ukraine, 50% of their minerals. The UK needs to do the same payback as we British people. Sharon says Zelensky does not want a ceasefire because if he does, he won't get all the money we keep dishing out to him. That's Sharon in Staffordshire there. Let's hear a voice note from Phil from Hertfordshire. This is about Matthew Torbett, who was our guest a little bit earlier on the debate desk.
Good morning, Peter. Phil from Hearts. I'm afraid your guest is deluded. Trump is not viewed as toxic in this country. There are many, many, many people that are on the side of Trump, and I think it's just wishful thinking on his part. Typical Liberal. They are absolutely starting to badmouth when things go wrong for them, and they drag people into the gutter, and we are sick of it, and we know their game. He's deluded.
Thanks very much indeed, Phil. Possibly having a battle with a self-service checkout there from the beeps in the background. It's interesting you mentioned that on a more serious note on Trump. And yeah, look, he divides opinion right across the world. He definitely has his supporters. We've had many people contacting us over the last 48 hours saying that he has done a good job and actually Zelensky wasn't treated badly at all. And that he was right to make those points. Others saying that Zelensky was humiliated. There are lots of different views on this. Let's get another view from Anna in Bedford.
Hi, Peter. Just a quick question. We never hear about Germany, France, Belgium, etc. pledging billions of pounds to the Ukraine. Do they? or is it just the UK that sends the money? Great show. Bye.
Thanks, Anna. Well, lots of other countries have given money, although there's been a lot of criticism, particularly of Germany. Olaf Scholz is currently the Chancellor, but it looks as if he's going to be replaced pretty quickly by this Merz guy. And I think that it's very interesting from Germany's perspective because they have a lot of very strong views on Ukraine, but often they haven't backed it up with action or indeed with money. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of the summit this afternoon as well. Zelensky is here in London. We'll bring you the latest. And of course, Mike will be here tomorrow morning between 6 and 10 for all the fallout from that. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear more from Starmer today on all of this and in the House of Commons tomorrow, and we'll bring you full coverage, of course, on Talk. Matt is in Cheshire and has given me a ring at 0344 499 1000. Matt, I haven't spoken to you in a little while. What do you make of Trump?
I watched that live on Friday night, and I was.
You and me both, Matt. It was one of those kind of moments.
I was out campaigning against an HMO on my estate all day and knocking on doors. And I got home and I sat down and had my tea and I was like, "Is this real?
Yeah.
This is mind blowing."
So what often happens, I'll give you a little insight into behind the scenes. What often happens is that when those things happen, they're generally quite dull. Like the one that Starmer was on Thursday, when I was on air as well, that when that came through, I was on air, and I'll be brutally honest, I thought, right, not much to see here. We will, we'll play a bit of this. We'll see what happened. Okay, we'll hear from Trump. I was making a few notes. I was, to be honest, looking at my phone and so on. And I thought with the Zelensky one, well, maybe that'll be the same thing. Maybe it'll be a similar thing. And then what happened. Matt has apparently disappeared, but we'll get him back. We'll talk to Matt more. Richard is in Sheffield, wants to talk about Trump. Richard, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say? Richard, have we got you, Richard in Sheffield? No, we don't. Okay, I'll go to a few messages here. Penny in Essex says, what was even worse in the bullying of Zelensky was that it was 2-on-1. Then Trump said, enough, you've said too much already. The poor man hadn't been allowed to speak and he was only speaking English for a short time, his second language. Absolutely disgusting. I can't get over it, says Penny in Essex. Matt, we lost you there for a minute, but I was just explaining how extraordinary it was, and certainly you had the same experience watching what happened at the Oval Office on Friday. I think people are still reacting to it, still taking it in, perhaps.
Part of me loves it because the old sort of way of politics of statesmanlike language and decency has only led to Britain's decline. In the last few days, I've seen the statements of our political class are so tedious and benign. It's boring. And the views of talk viewers are literally more varied and considered than that of the politicians.
Correct. It's interesting, Matt, because when I saw what happened on Friday, there's sort of two sides of my brain. I don't know about you, but the sort of one side was the kind of concerned citizen, oh no, this is all a diplomatic problem and it's going to be absolute chaos. And the other is, you know, Alison Steadman's character in Gavin and Stacey, when she says, it's the drama, Mick, I just love it. There was sort of an element of that as well.
Yeah. I knew that they would immediately use it to attack Trump, and it would all be Trump's fault. It's a gift to the liberal media. I think my view is, no matter what the Conservative and Labour Party say, they want this war to continue. And the new kids on the block. I
mean, they're doing a big summit today talking about peace. Surely they want the war to end, no?
Well, they've said that, but they all say they're fully behind Zelensky. That sounds like you're picking a side, doesn't it?
Well, they have. I mean, it's been pretty straightforward. Do you still think? Well, actually, this is a good point. Do you think Starmer can be a bridge between Trump and Zelensky? Can he get them to kiss and make up?
I mean, Starmer. I was hoping that what happened was the other way around. I was hoping Trump would speak to Starmer like he spoke to Zelensky.
Right. I know you're no fan of Starmer. Matt, thank you for your thoughts. That's Matt in Cheshire there. Mike is in York. Mike, what's your view? You're very welcome to the programme.
Morning, Peter.
Hi.
Yeah, I can't understand what the fuss is with the way Trump is treating Zelensky. I feel for Zelensky, but how did those same European leaders treat the UK when we were leaving for Brexit?
That's not a bad point, actually. That's a very, very good point, Mike. I don't think there were scenes just quite like that, but certainly...
There were. And let's not forget, our fishing rights are coming up for negotiation again. Does anybody listening to this think that, you know, kind of France is not going to play hardball and blackmail us with cutting off electric to the Channel Islands or anything like that?
I don't think they're going to cut. I don't think they're going to cut off electric to the Channel Islands, Mike. I don't think that's going to happen. But listen, thanks for your thoughts, Tristan. Let's have a voice note from him on backing Trump.
More money given by Britain to Ukraine. There you go. Zelensky's a freeloader. Trump was perfectly right, and Zelensky had better watch out over his shoulder, because you never know what can happen back home in the Ukraine. His base may turn on him for this.
Interesting point there from Tristan. Let's hear from Claire.
Starmer is nailing his colours to the mast by giving Ukraine money pledges now, at this time of all times. Now this smarmy, grovelling episode with Trump shows him for what he is, a nobody and a whitewash and a two-face. Expecting Starmer to be a bridge builder is ludicrous. He can't even build bridges with his own people in his own country, vilified as being so-called far-right and in some way different. At least Trump talks and works for all his people and doesn't vilify them.
I think he vilifies some of them, Claire, but certainly the people who voted for him, he's very close to and connects in a way that many other leaders don't. Shirley, you have broken the rule. You've gone over a minute. We've got 63 seconds of Shirley in the Cotswolds, and it's only because you're so good and we like you so much, Shirley, and you send us voice notes from time to time, that we've allowed you to break the minute embargo. Less than a minute is what we want, to give everybody a chance, or as many people as possible, a chance to have their voice notes. But here's Shirley.
Why aren't the Scandinavian countries mentioned more, aside Keir Starmer and Macron? It seems to me that those two are just the most ambitious in Europe who want their names in the headlines, and obviously Starmer wants to end his career on the gravy train in Brussels. And also, I'd like to know how much money the Scandinavian countries are giving to the war. We hear very little from any of their leaders. Just a little word about the Trump haters who are all over the place because of the hurty words session that none of us liked to witness the other evening. But you know, he's the only man. He's got the EU dancing to his tune, and he basically wants an end to the war and peace. But some of these people, they hate Trump more than they hate young soldiers coming home in body bags. I wonder how they'd feel if it was their children being conscripted.
Very interesting points there from Shirley. Thank you. Richard is in Sheffield and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Richard, what point would you like to make?
Hello, Pete.
Hi, Richard. Go ahead.
Hi, mate. Yeah, sorry. Just to mute the TV.
That's all right.
Sorry, pal. Yeah, what it is, Pete, is I agree with domestic politics is bang like my politics, like like centre right kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think we're not. Sorry, I've got to mute my telly. Sorry, I've got no battery.
Do you know what, Richard? We'll come back to you, Richard, because we're a bit pressed for time. But I promise you, we'll come back to you when you've sorted everything out there. We'll come back to you a bit later in the programme. We're going to talk to Dental Davidson in a second. He was a foreign affairs advisor to a number of prime ministers and is now a director of Global Council, which Peter Mandelson used to run before he became ambassador to the United States. We'll talk to Dental in just a second here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Georgia Maloney and Sir Keir Starmer are chatting together in the White Room at Downing Street. We've got some pictures coming in of that. They're not live, but this is in the last few minutes. We know that the Italian Prime Minister is there and talking to Sir Keir Starmer. Now then, let's speak to Dental Davidson. He is a Director of Global Council, but he was a Special Advisor in Europe to the Prime Minister Theresa May, and also advised William Hague on EU affairs when he was Foreign Secretary. Dental, thank you for joining me this morning. Dental now works at Global Council, which is a global consultancy, and we used to be headed by the now Ambassador to the United States, Peter Mandelson. Dental, in your long and varied career as a sort of a diplomat, working with a lot of diplomats anyway, and doing a lot of diplomatic negotiation, have you ever seen anything quite like Friday?
No, I haven't. We do live in a new world. And while what happened on Friday is very shocking, it shouldn't be surprising to anyone. After all, we did see earlier in the week the United States vote at the United Nations in a way that no American president has ever had his diplomats vote before, and that is alongside Russia, Belarus, and North Korea. So we could see that this kind of thing was coming, and given their kinds of behaviour, that we shouldn't be totally surprised by it.
Where does the relationship between Zelensky and Trump go from here? And do you think Keir Starmer could be a bridge, as he has sort of put himself into the middle of this, a person who could perhaps solve that relationship? And how much of it is to do with personal relationships, and how much is just the wider diplomatic picture, do you think?
Well, he's certainly trying to be a bridge, but we don't yet know whether he will succeed. And whether he can succeed really depends on whether Trump wants him to be able to succeed. Clearly, there's a big effort underway to try to patch things up, to see if there is a way that Zelensky, while keeping enough of Ukraine's dignity for Ukrainians to be able to think that he's doing a proper job for them, can reach back out to Trump. But it depends on whether Trump wants this as an excuse for things to say he hasn't shown enough respect, we should just let these guys go, or whether he does in the end want something to work. But if Trump wants to act as a peacemaker, he does, after all, need Zelensky. He needs the Ukrainians to make peace. And clearly, if what he says to them is effectively surrender, we're not going to do anything for you, the only terms we will back you on, leave Russia in the dominant position in Ukraine, then that isn't going to be enough for Zelensky. So Trump does need Zelensky a bit, but whether he will become tired of it, just be able to say, I've done everything I can, it's their fault, Zelensky isn't up for peace, I wash my hands of it, let's move on to other things.
Okay.
That may be where he ends up.
Tell me about the summit today. What will the dynamics be at play? Because there seem to be quite a number of leaders who are involved with that, not the Baltic states, but many others. Georgia Maloney in Downing Street at the moment. We know that there are lots of other European states, Western European states there. They largely agree here, don't they? But what can they actually do to bring peace, to talk about peace, to move things forward, especially when the position of America and whether they might withdraw is still at least a question?
Well, Peter, the do in what you said is the operative word. So the object of today must be find agreement on doing things. And doing things means about, first, immediately for Ukraine, how more money can be raised for it, how we can ensure that they get more weapons from Europe, given that the United States is very unreliable now, and then also plans for the future defence of Europe, including ourselves, in a world where the United States is not a reliable defence guarantor. And this is the big thing that's changed for us here in Britain, is that since Germany declared war on the United States all the way back on the 11th of December 1941, we've always been able to say that the United States is there for Europe's democracies. There is a defence guarantee. And clearly that is no longer reliable, at least not for everyone. And so we are looking at a world where we've got to be able to defend Europe potentially without American help. Now, the main aim of current British diplomacy is to bind the Americans in so that there is still some kind of guarantee, but it is a bit wobbly. And that means that we've got to be able to work together to build up our industry, build up our armed forces, so that we are not so reliant on a United States who may not be there for us. So it's working out those plans, and it's going to be quite difficult, obviously, for Britain outside the EU, because a lot of this stuff is naturally going to be EU-based. So not just to ensure that there is going to be practical action, but also that we find a place for Britain in that works.
So a big task ahead on a very difficult set of circumstances for Keir Starmer. Just from your own experience, how important are personalities in all of this? There's one thing that Trump has, and that is personality. So has Zelensky, so has Starmer, so has your old boss, Peter Mandelson as well, the ambassador to the United States. How important is it to rub along and to have those kind of personal relationships, especially when things are moving so quickly?
Well, it can make no difference, and it can make a dramatic difference. So it can make no difference in terms that everyone's there is a grown-up, and everyone's there to do a job for their country and think of the wider interest, the collective interest. And so people can't let two personalities get in the way too much of that. But it can also matter a very great deal, because if you have a persuasive personality, if you can charm someone around to a position, if you can open up people's minds, then that matters a great deal. And then, of course, if people trust you, that's also vitally important. Trust is central. If you're putting your country's interests partly in someone else's hands, looking for a relationship where you're going to rely on each other, you've got to be able to trust the other person.
Can we trust Trump at the moment, do you think?
No.
Okay. Denzel, thank you.
Short answer.
Okay, short answer, strong answer. Denzel Davidson there, Director of Global Counsel. Thanks for joining us this morning. Denzel's a former advisor on Europe to Theresa May and to William Hague, Lord Hague, when he was, when he was Foreign Secretary back in the day, so thank you to him. Lots of people getting in touch, including Josh, who says, I feel indifferent sending all this money to Ukraine because we are struggling ourselves financially at the moment, but on the other hand, how much will it cost us in the future if Putin doesn't stop at Ukraine? If we stop all this woke funding and stop foreign aid besides Ukraine and indefinitely pause this net zero nonsense, wouldn't we as a nation be in a far better position? Mike in Rugby says, why on earth don't we offer Ukraine a £500 billion minerals deal? When will any UK government start thinking outside the box, says Mike in Rugby. Richard in Shrewsbury, the US is seeking a closer diplomatic and economic relationship with Russia in order to counter Chinese expansion. War in Ukraine is not in Trump's interest, and if the UK and EU want to continue to invest billions and potentially manpower in propping up the illegitimate Zelensky regime, then more fool them, says Richard. He was elected. Lots to come on this. We'll take your calls and we'll speak to Richard in Sheffield again. We'll get him back on the line in just a few minutes here on Talk.
think in some ways Donald Trump perhaps wouldn't understand Zelensky as a man. I mean, he's been very keen to kind of undermine Zelensky and talk down to him. But the idea, I think, that somebody would have the amount of integrity or principles that Zelensky has, I think, is very much a mystery to Donald Trump, who's not a man who would, you know, die for his country or for the people in it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
About an hour ago, I spoke to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel. This is part of what she had to say.
What we saw at the White House on Friday was not right. It was deeply distressing to see. And I say that as someone, Peter, as you know, I've been in government. I was in government at the time when Russia illegally invaded Ukraine. And we stand with Ukraine with, I have to say, with a great degree of pride. And we look at President Zelensky with such respect in the way in which he's conducted himself over what has been a terrible, terrible few years.
Now, Richard in Sheffield. You ready for a call now, Richard?
I am, mate. Sorry.
Good man. No worries at all. What would you like to say?
Yeah, Peter, I'm a bit miffed, to be honest. Like, Trump is like my, I love his domestic politics and all this lot. But can I ask you one question, Peter?
Yeah.
Do you agree with me that Ukraine's, like, since fall of the Soviet Union, is a sovereign country?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah. So, like, imagine, you know, like, Putin's raid, and you know, we gave him a pass, Europe and everything, because I put that on Angela Merkel, to be honest. But we gave him a pass, taking in 2014. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like the thing is, Peter, I'm a bit like for one, you shouldn't ever, if you've got the art of diplomacy, you don't. Like, start cussing on you. You know, I wouldn't even do it in front of my friends. If I had a problem with my friend, I'd take him aside. You don't do what they did.
Yeah, listen, Richard, I think a lot of people agree with you. A lot of people don't feel it was very edifying spectacle. That was Richard in Sheffield there. Thank you. Rachel has a voice note about Zelensky.
I'd like to point out it was Zelensky who asked DJ Vance a question. That didn't just pop out of nowhere. Zelensky asked Vance, and then it all exploded. Zelensky needs to go back to Trump, sort this out, and he needs to go back and look for peace rather than a continuation of the war, because the only people Putin is afraid of is America and Donald Trump. Putin isn't afraid of European leaders scuttling about with their meetings and building an army over the next 10 years. America's the only one that Putin respects. And on another note, where is President Erdogan? Turkey are members of NATO, so where are they and why aren't they being included in any of this?
Very interesting points there. James has another voice note.
Hi Peter, it's James. Just like to say that I quite like Trump. I don't really like this Starmer. He's switched all the attention onto him. All the other parties, like all the Conservatives, are all huddling around. They're all worried, turning eyes off of what's going on in this country, you know? Yeah, that's all I've got to say.
Mark is in Lancashire.
I was just wondering if anybody's heard the term Ukraine denier yet. And if we haven't heard it yet, then it's not going to be that far off, is it? We've got climate denier, COVID denier. Next, we've got to have Ukraine denier. Who'll be the first one to come up with it? You're a Ukraine denier. Get to the back of the queue. No biscuits for you today. It's all just So familiar, isn't it?
Oh, Mark, apparently I am getting a biscuit at one point, which I'm very much looking forward to. There's also actually the Christmas do. We're finally doing it. The team behind the glass who put the programme together, they've done a great job, and we're finally getting to our Christmas do. It's at a nearby restaurant. I'll let you guess which one. Ralph is in Banbury, just outside Oxford. Ralph, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, Peter. Firstly, I'd just like to say I think you guys at talkSPORT do a fabulous job, and I'm a first-time caller.
Thank you, Ralph.
Okay, yeah, it's absolutely my pleasure. Look, my point is, considering the case of the European and the UK economies and the situations that we do find ourselves, and the fact that we have been heavily reliant upon the US to support and bolster NATO security to guarantee it, at this point, if the UK were to actually support, sorry, I'm doing it wrong.
Turn me down.
UK were to support a UK European defence force. Surely, would this be the time where the UK and Europe should now talk about creating a fair trade deal so that we can improve our GDP and have the ability to invest in such a defence force?
There's a lot in that, Ralph, and I think in terms of a defence force, I mean, is that something you'd want to see, a European army? That is, I mean, we have NATO, and Zelensky says there should be a European army as well.
No, not necessarily, but I don't really see how we're going to be able to support the Ukraine in such a way that the Europe and the UK wants without being part of such a defence force. I mean, we are a sovereign nation, and, I think if we were to commit to do that, which would mean we would have to then send our money to the European Defensive Procurement Platform, which is a big commitment, then surely at this point we should be talking about a fair trade deal. Simple as that.
Very interesting thoughts there, Ralph. Your first call, but don't make it the last one. That was Ralph in Banbury. Thank you. Giorgia Meloni has said, this is the Prime Minister of Italy, says both the UK and Italy are good at bridge building. That's what she says. Let's see if any bridges can be built. We'll see what happens in the summit today. Chris in Brighton says Britain and the whole of Europe has crucified its economy through self-harming sanctions at the altar of Ukraine and at the behest of NATO. Our politicians and their mouthpieces are working against our interests. The time for the blank cheque with no questions asked to Ukraine is over. Simon in Nottingham, the lady you just spoke mentioned the Falklands conflict, and as far as I can remember, not one of our so-called allies supported us or helped us in that conflict. Also, after we and the Americans freed Europe from occupation in the 40s, how do they treat us now, says Simon. It was a deliberate nibble at Zelensky. Why can't people see this classic Trump negotiation tactic? And Dean says the state visit was a peace offering to make up for Labour in the past, saying Trump wasn't welcome, and other offences people say just to take it back and are being just as offensive on the hate Trump agenda. John in Peterhead says, Peter, great show. The chaos suits Starmer as it keeps his feelings at home out of the papers and hoping people forget what they've done so far. Pensioners, farmers and small businesses collapse. Cliff is in East Yorkshire and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Cliff, what would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Now then, after Zelensky's dress down in the sacred Oval Office, now then, Trump said that he didn't have any cards. Well, in actual fact, he owns the ultimate Trump card, because all he's got to do is get in touch with President Xi of China, say that he can have all the mineral rights if he gets protection. Now then, there's no way that Putin would attack any of the Chinese army, that's for sure. And Trump would end up with no valuable mineral rights to it, which he desperately needs for his explosion in the AI industry. So, Zelensky actually has all the Trump cards, which, I find extraordinary that he didn't treat him with a bit more respect.
Okay, thanks very much for your thoughts there, Cliff in East Yorkshire there. And Gary says people like Sir Malcolm Rifkin need to wake up to the new world we are living in. Trump warned Europe 8 years ago that we need to stop relying on the US taxpayer to pay for our defence, yet all he keeps asking is what Trump would do if Putin broke a peace deal and went back to Ukraine, when what he should be asking is what would European leaders do. That is our problem now. Yvonne in Staffordshire. Morning, Peter. Some people have watched the entire press conference and not just the highlights. Zelensky started this disrespect, if you want to call it that. He interrupted Vance when he was speaking. He was shaking his head. He lied, calling the projected fall of Ukraine in 3 to 4 days as Russian propaganda, when that was the official opinion of the US State Department. Zelensky said no to a ceasefire, no to giving ground. The only one talking peace is Trump, says Yvonne in Staffordshire. David is in France and has the final call before the 12 o'clock news. David, what would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. A couple of things. Firstly, who decided that it's America's responsibility to defend the Western world? And
they are a superpower, and with great power becomes great responsibility, and they have been there in the past. You know, World War II would not have been won without the Americans.
Or without the Japanese attacking Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, that's part of it. But certainly, when the Americans got involved, the war changed. Yeah.
Now, you could thank the Japanese for the Americans saving us.
Not sure I will, David, but yes.
Well, they weren't coming in without that, were they, Peter?
Yeah, but
Anyway,
I'm not going to thank the Japanese for Pearl Harbor. David,
No,
sorry, your point in the present day. What would you like to say?
Well, that's the point. Who made them? Who made them Big Brother? You know, they're an independent sovereign country. They're the other side of the ocean. Why should they be expected to defend Europe when Europe should be perfectly capable of defending itself? And allied to that is, if the European nations were so concerned about the strength of Russia and Russia attacking Europe with Ukraine as the buffer, why, when they saw the Russians advancing, didn't they simply rush through membership of NATO for Ukraine? Then the war would never have happened.
That's not how it works, though, David. You can't just change these things as they are. But it's some interesting points there, David. Thank you for that. Annie in Devon says, whatever the White House cringe fest delivered to all sides, Starmer and the troop of clowns he leads are breathing a massive sigh of relief that our own disastrous, failing government is out of the spotlight. Secure borders, ha ha ha, says Annie. Listen, we're going to talk about something slightly different after the break. Foreign national offenders could be deported quicker, thanks to a new £5 million government investment. We're also going to talk about a UK charity accused of helping to fund Hamas terrorists, but lots more on Ukraine, on what Starmer's doing, reaction to Trump as well. Let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. We're here until 1 o'clock. Lots to discuss between now and then. We're continuing the discussion and we want to make sure you get your views on the air about Trump, Starmer, Zelensky and many leaders here in London today. Giorgia Maloney's been talking to Keir Starmer in Downing Street. And what do you think? What do you think? Where should this go? There's more money has been given to Ukraine over the last 24 hours by Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, about 2.6 billion. Some of it has been frozen Russian assets, but of course we, the taxpayer, are giving them a lot of money as well. Tell us your thoughts on all of that, including your reaction. It seems such a long time ago in some respects because so much has happened, but still it is less than 48 hours since those extraordinary scenes in the White House. We've been speaking this morning to Priti Patel, the Shadow Foreign Secretary as well, but and we're going to continue talking about that, but we're also going to talk about the UK charity accused of helping to fund Hamas terrorists in Israel and in the Gaza Strip. Very, very interesting there. Foreign national offenders could be deported quicker thanks to a new £5 million government spending plan in prisons across England and Wales. That's a news story out today. We'll talk about that and whether that can help. There's quite a lot of changes mooted in regard to the prison system. Let us know what you think about that. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, or you can use the main number to do three things. One is give me a ring, two is send me a voice note. Plenty of voice notes coming in today. Keep them coming. Or you can send me a WhatsApp text message 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Max in Warwickshire says, hi Peter, two-tier Starmer, the farmer harmer, is loving being centre of attention. It keeps him in the news and all politicians love a war to keep themselves in power. As Prime Minister, it's all show a game, says Max in Warwickshire. How can Starmer, says this person, say he wants a peace deal? He's just promised Ukraine over 2 billion for a loan, one more a bit one-sided. It's actually money they've been given, essentially. John in Long Lawford says, did I hear you correctly? He said Starmer had a personality, charisma bypass would be more accurate. And final one before we go to our next story, Claire says, as I see it, Peter, Zelensky wants to surrender with backup. Why sign away his mineral rights without having a defence strategy from Trump? I think tempers became inflamed with Vance and Trump because Zelensky would not capitulate and sign without some guarantee of safety. As I say, we'll continue that debate. But we're going to talk about a different story in the news today, and that is about a UK charity raising money for Gaza and what is going on there. It's facing a police investigation over claims the cash has ended up funding Hamas terrorists. Save One Life UK has been reported to counter-terror police over fears some of the money it distributes to children may be diverted to the terrorists. It's a London-based charity. It's raised about £2 million in the last 4 years. Most of its aid directed at Gaza since the start of what happened and, of course, Israel's retaliation, defending itself after those horrendous 7th of October attacks by Hamas terrorists in 2023. Real concerns about the lack of controls over the ways the funds are raised and indeed spent. Well, let's speak to Gary Mond, who's the chairman of the National Jewish Assembly. Gary, I know you keep a very close eye on what happens in the Middle East. Tell us your thoughts on this story.
It is absolutely disgraceful that charity monies are being used essentially to end up in the coffers of Hamas.
These are allegations, of course, and we need to be careful about this. We have tried to contact the charity. They haven't got back to us on this. Scotland Yard says we treat all reports made to the anti-terrorist hotline and online portal as confidential. Because of this and for operational security reasons, we can't comment or confirm specific details. But we do know these details are here. Save One Life is a registered charity that's been sending money to Gaza. The complainant alleges during an unknown broker in Turkey. And you've had a run-in with them as well, haven't you, Gary?
Yes. The real villain in the piece here has not been mentioned, and that's the Charity Commission. What exactly is the Charity Commission doing about Islamist trustees who essentially are promoting the distribution of monies to what ultimately could could be terrorist organisations. Unfortunately, our Charity Commission is far more interested in policing the social media posts of charity trustees than it is in actually looking at what the trustees themselves are doing, what the charities themselves are doing, and how charity funds are being misspent in the way they're currently being misspent.
In this, how much do you know about Save One Life itself? How much do you know about this specific charity, Gary?
I only know what I've read in the press, in the Telegraph articles on this, but it does appear that certain of the charity trustees need to be more closely monitored. And indeed, we need to look to see whether they are fit and proper people to be charity trustees, and whether their presence as charity trustees actually brings the whole charity industry into disrepute.
Well, certainly we have attempted to get a statement from Save One Life UK. How big a problem is this more generally when people rattle tins or say, you know, help people who are, you know, there are many civilians who are having an absolutely dreadful time in Gaza. There are all sorts of images we see all the time of children who have been maimed or killed. There are many people who are victims, innocent victims of what Israel is doing. Of course, that is Israel would say they're defending themselves after what Hamas has done. Those hostages still haven't been released. Some of them have, but there's still many there. There are bodies that haven't been returned. It's a horrible conflict, and of course a very emotive one when people see videos of injured children, for example.
The problem is actually one of control. Is the entire operation of people rattling tins to raise money for children actually being properly controlled, and a charity, a reputable charity in the UK, is able to ensure that the funds actually go for charitable purposes? If it is, then one cannot criticise it. But I fear in this particular case, all the signs are that there are extreme problems and that the monies are not going to where they ought to go. Indeed, this is the much bigger picture which you're alluding to, of course, is where monies are going to in the Gaza Strip from all sources. For example, what we hear about monies for overseas aid going to Gaza. How can we be sure the money's going to the right places? I fear we can't.
Well, certainly even a UN agency, UNRWA, for example, has been under huge criticism. What is absolutely clear is that it is riddled with Hamas terrorists, and they've used buildings, they've indoctrinated children and so on. And that is a UN agency, UN money, including money given to UNRWA from the British taxpayer, £17 million given on the same day as exactly the same amount, £17 million, was cut from maths funding in this country. I wonder, do you think, I mean, how can there's a lot of aid going into Gaza, and some of it is pilfered by Hamas terrorists who are taking it away from hungry people. I just wonder, from your perspective, Gary, how do we best support innocent civilians in Gaza? Is it possible to decouple them from the Hamas regime that's there?
It is very difficult and can only be achieved when full military control over Gaza is achieved, be it by Israel or be it by another entity. For so long as Hamas is in control and its fellow terrorist organisations and even the Palestinian Authority are in control, nothing is going to be achieved, I fear. The objective needs to be to, as you say, decouple the two, but also going forward, we have to focus on the de-radicalisation of the Gaza population. And that can only be achieved when there is a complete change of control within Gaza.
And of course, we've seen as some of those hostages are handed over, this horrible spectacle, ghastly spectacle of them being given goodie bags, sometimes not the right information, deliberately about members of their family that have been killed. We see people bringing their children out, Gazans bringing children out to see this spectacle as if it's a sort of form of entertainment. I wonder how you do de-radicalise those people who aren't necessarily members of Hamas, but they're certainly providing the slipstream in which Hamas terrorists are swimming.
You're absolutely right, and this is evidence of a much bigger problem. I'm afraid, largely, and people don't like saying this, but Gaza equals Hamas and Hamas equals Gaza. It's not completely true, but it is largely true, and that is at the core of the problem.
Yeah, you're right, Gary. No, there was some There was some surveys done recently. I mean, it's very, very hard to survey people in Gaza, but saying that only about a third of people actually support Hamas. But as Gary says, you know, it's a very, very difficult thing to decouple, and we don't know really what people think. We see what they demonstrate. They demonstrate, a lot of them, support for Hamas. Gary, thank you. That's Gary Mond there, who's the chairman of the National Jewish Assembly. And yet again, we did try to contact Save One Life UK, which has been reported to counter-terror police over fears some of the money it distributes to children may be diverted to Hamas. And Scotland Yard, the Metropolitan Police said, we treat all reports made to the anti-terrorist hotline and online portal as confidential. Because of this, and for operational security reasons, we therefore do not comment on or confirm specific details or matters that may get reported to us through this route. However, all reports get reviewed by officers, and if it is assessed that further police action is required, then we get passed to the relevant police force or counter-terrorism unit to carry this out. Let's speak to James in London on Zelensky. James, you're welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hi Peter. A great show.
Thank you.
Great Sunday, actually, listening in. I'd just like to say about Zelensky's performance in the White House on Friday was unforgivable. He was there to go and sign a deal, which he had okayed with Marco Rubio, who was sat there in the chair next to J.D. Vance, and then he starts to have a verbal brawl with the President of the United States in his own house in front of the Secretary of State and throwing out the agreement. Then, when he gets thrown out of the White House, he decides to come across to Europe and put a wedge between Europe and the United States. And today we find out that the Norway government has refused to refuel American warships. What's going on?
Well, James, it certainly sounds as if you think Zelensky is entirely to blame for this. Do you not think Trump and J.D. Vance have some form of responsibility for what happened on Friday?
No. Without the Americans and there's $500 billion of aid and their weapons and their advisors and their boots on the ground, which they did have to basically help the Ukrainians in their strategy, they get spat in their face. Without the Americans, Ukraine would have fallen. And if they,
I don't disagree with any of James. I don't disagree with any of that. My question is, should Zelensky just have to put up with that treatment? The world saw that.
He should have gone across there and not initiated it by backing his eyelids and then starting having a verbal argument. If you're supposed to be a leader of a country and you know this is going downhill, then you stop it and you go behind closed doors. But no.
But Trump didn't go behind closed doors. J.D. Vance didn't go behind closed doors. They continued that argument there. They barracked him. They spoke to him in very, very clear and direct terms, and it was very embarrassing for everybody involved.
It wasn't embarrassing for me to watch it because I was watching this and I'm watching the power of the United States put into place this man and tell him, you will do as you were told because without us, you will be defeated. And if he thinks the European Union will cough up $500 billion to go and help this war machine keep on going and generations of Ukrainians die, then he's got another thing. The President of the United States will not tolerate being spoken to like this in his house.
James, thanks for your opinion. Strong one there. Simon in Sheffield, what do you think?
Hi there. Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi there. No, I was just thinking. I mean, I did watch. I first of all saw the argument part of the Oval Office thing, and then the next morning I watched all of it. And
yeah. Let me just ask you, actually, Simon. Not everybody's watched the whole thing. Did your opinion change from one day to the next?
I guess a little, yeah. I mean,
okay.
I literally came back in on Friday night and I just turned the TV on and the argument was happening. I'm like, oh my God, this is horrendous. The only person that will like this is Putin. The next morning I thought I need to watch it all, and you know, Zelensky was shaking his head as one of the other people that called in said, and he was like opening his arms and like waving his hands around a little bit. But I think you can give him a hall pass for that, given what he has gone through. When I watched the interview, I thought J.D. Vance was the one that escalated it because Trump wasn't escalating, and then obviously Trump got more agitated. But what I was thinking is like, what is his objective here, i.e. Trump? It's consistently said, even in his first term, that the Europeans don't put enough into defence spending, and therefore it is on the USA to, pay the bill. And I'm wondering if the play here is on Germany, because they've got a new government. They're not going to be able to form a coalition that will have the ability to change the debt brake, how much they can spend versus GDP.
Yeah.
and therefore will not be able to fund the additional war spending or arms spending. But Merz has said he may push that through in this current term, which is, I think, the 24th or the 28th of March when it ends. Is this just Trump escalating things so the Europeans have to get their act into gear, i.e. Germany?
Very interesting thoughts there, Simon. I hadn't considered the German angle in that depth before, so I appreciate that. Simon in Sheffield there. Lanks Lad says Starmer now obviously using the Trump-Zelensky spat to sell the UK back into the EU. I'm not sure that's what's afoot here, but listen, I think that's maybe always somewhere in Starmer's mind, I'm not sure. Sharon in Staffordshire says, no, Priti Patel, it was not distressing for me watching Trump tearing Zelensky apart. I quite enjoyed it, says Sharon from Staffordshire. Starmer's production of The King's Letter, says Gerald, as though it were the star prize in a TV game show, was acutely embarrassing. Mike in Erith says it would seem that Zelensky's slogan is make money, not peace. Frank and Bromley, European countries lose every war except the UK, who, with the exception of the Falklands War, only win with the help of the USA. What's changed, says Frank and Bromley. And Peter says, if Trump ceases to support Ukraine, then he is segmenting America's support as part of the free world. In this sense, he is seeing America as a special case, allowing the rest of the free world isolating the responsibility to protect global freedom. Selfish, bullying and disregarding are words that come to mind. Plenty more opinions coming your way in the next few minutes here on Talk.
They need help. I'll always be with the British, okay? I'll always be with them. But they don't need help. You look at their career, you have done very well over the years, haven't you?
We have. I'm very proud of our country. And but we've also always been backing each other up between our two countries. That is why this is the greatest alliance for prosperity and security I think the world has ever seen. Whenever necessary, we've absolutely backed each other up, and that's at the
Could
core
you take on Russia by yourselves?
Well...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of messages coming into the building, not least on Twitter. Les says, isn't it wonderful how our fabulous leader in 10 Downing Street has world political matters just now to deflect his pathetic running of the UK, over $2 billion per year to 2031 on a 100-year agreement, plus paying billions to give the Chagos Islands away to China's buddies Mauritius. He and Millivolt, lots of people are calling Ed Miliband Millivolt. These nicknames are quite interesting. Want to destroy UK farming over 500 million. The man has more faces than the Albert clock in Belfast, says Les, who I think is perhaps originally from Belfast. Lady Anne says Zelensky needs to go back and apologise for his disgraceful behaviour. Rosie says, I agree wholeheartedly with the caller James you just had on a minute ago. Ukraine will not win the war. Trump is the man to negotiate. Zelensky running to Starmer has made matters worse. And thanks to Maisie May, who says, I'm still keeping up with current affairs after a late swim in Thailand watching Talk with Peter. I can't help it. She sent me a picture of her by the pool looking like a picture of paradise. But enough about her watching me. The pool in Thailand and so on seem to be quite nice as well. Becky has been in touch with a voice note. You can send these in on 0344 499 1000. Becky has some thoughts on Donald Trump.
Morning, Peter. Becky from Worcestershire here. I've supported Trump up to now, but I was absolutely appalled at his behaviour on Friday, and I don't support him in this. Neither do I think we should pull support for Ukraine. We can't become an isolationist country. We never have been. And I'm one of those RAPs whose winter fuel allowance has been withdrawn. But if Starmer had said to me, look, I'm going to give it to Ukraine, I'd have said, go ahead and here's another fiver. I know it's not much, but I feel that much strongly. Thanks, Peter.
That is a strong opinion, certainly, Becky, especially when it has an impact on you yourself. Ian has been in touch.
Hi, Peter. Ian from Hemel Hempstead, loving your Sunday shows. What I'm seeing is the Truman Show playing out here. Have you ever seen the Truman Show?
Yeah.
And Zelensky is Truman, and all the other characters, they're all scripted. Everyone else knows exactly what's going on. Trump, Macron, Starmer, they're all playing out this narrative. And poor old Truman or Zelensky is all in the middle of it, wondering what the hell's going on. And he'll wake up and smell the coffee at some point. All will be revealed.
Ian, very, very interesting thought there. Do you know there's actually a psychological condition? I think it's called the Truman Complex or something, where you think basically your life is the Truman Show. You're Truman. An incredible film with Jim Carrey back in the day, but yeah, certainly informed a lot of people's thinking around all of this. Ray has some thoughts on Friday's meeting in the White House. This is what he is saying.
Ray from Taunton. My submission of this Zelensky affair in the White House was that obviously in the private talks beforehand, things didn't go as Trump wanted. I don't think that Zelensky would sign a deal because he wasn't promised a backstop. And so at that point, they decided to take him out in public and humiliate him, which I thought was very, very bad. And I like Trump, but I think there he failed miserably, especially getting the guy in to ask about his suit, I thought was deplorable.
Interesting thoughts there. Tony in Portsmouth will have some more, no doubt. 0344 499 1000 is the number that Tony has called. What would you like to say, Tony?
Yes, afternoon, Peter.
Hi there.
I don't feel sorry for Zelensky. The million people Trump was on about that died, they didn't die in their sleep. They died in the most disgusting ways. So are we going to condemn thousands more people to die in that way?
I hope not. What do you think should happen now, Tony?
Well, I think former President Zelensky would be totally ignored.
Okay.
So
okay.
Between Trump and Putin, whatever they want to decide, that's what's going to happen.
He is the democratically elected leader of Ukraine. Surely he should have some say.
He's not. No, by international law, he is not. He hasn't been elected, and he's cancelled elections.
As did Churchill when we were at war.
Yeah, by international law, we haven't got time to discuss it here, but by international law, he's cancelled elections just like the Labour Party has cancelled local elections.
Well, they've postponed them. They've postponed them, Tony.
It's the same as cancelling them.
No, it's not. Tony, thanks for your thoughts there. Tony in Portsmouth there. Let's hear from Lisa in Canterbury, who has some thoughts on Keir Starmer.
Morning, Peter. It's Lisa from Canterbury. It makes me laugh, really, because Starmer always thinks he's speaking for everybody in the UK. He doesn't speak for anyone in the UK. He's against the UK. He can't even protect our borders, and he wants to send all that money out there, what, to keep killing people? How's that going to work? This is going to be a never-ending war. We haven't got any money in this country for anything. It's going to the dogs, and every single day we've got dangerous people coming in with the help of RNLI, might I add, as well, and Border Force. You know, it's just like a taxi ride now. It's a disgrace, this country, and Starmer is going to absolutely ruin it, and he's a very dangerous man. Good on Trump. Why should he put his country and his people at risk? That's what he wants, peace. There has to be a peace deal. You know, without a peace deal, it's just going to be continual. What's going to happen when the money runs out, this 2 or 3 billion, in 6 months' time? What, just going to send some more in? This country's finished. It really is. It's such an embarrassment with that man in power. Thank you.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, Lisa, because when you talk about, you know, will there be more money? Rachel Reeves at the budget there a couple of months ago did say that $3 billion a year is what we have committed to Ukraine for as long as is necessary. That is what she said at the budget. So that's a heck of a lot of money. Rob has some thoughts on Zelensky.
Peter, I honestly don't know why people have got a love-in with Zelensky, right? He turned up to the White House like a scruff, and he was disrespectful in the Oval Office, right? Telling Americans they will feel in the future what the Ukrainians feel. I mean, come on, mate. You dare go into the most powerful office in the world and start being a do you?
Okay, thank you, Rob, there, and thank you to Tech Update for bleeping that. Daniel in Epsom is on the line, 0344 499 1000. Daniel, what do you think?
Hi, Pete. How are you, mate?
Okay, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. Do you know what I think? I just think that if the government work for us, irrespective whether you like them or not. I mean, I know no one likes Starmer. He's about.
Well, some people do. He's got a big mandate.
Yeah, he hasn't really. He's got a lot of MPs, but the mandate's actually quite poor. But anyway, I sort of think is we haven't got like an account with loads of money in it that we can give away. I think people need to be aware that he wants to borrow money to then give away to Ukraine. And I think he should ask the people. He works for us. I'd like to borrow 30 million quid over the next 10 years to make your children's futures worse so I can help Ukraine. I think we need to have an honest debate about, I'd like to borrow this money and give it away at the detriment of your children's future. And how dare he do anything, right? Fiddling while Rome burns. In the UK, mass uncontrolled immigration is destroying our country. It's ruining the place. Anyone with eyes can see it, and he's doing absolutely nothing about it.
It seems to me, Daniel, it seems to me that Starmer seems to be fairly popular. I mean, Ukraine is the big, Ukraine and the Middle East are the two big political issues, Trump obviously coming into that as well, the two big international issues. And it seems to me that a lot of people, not everybody obviously, but a lot of people seem to be happy enough with what Starmer's doing on international issues. But domestically, there's just so many questions. You've posed some very good ones there in the last few seconds.
Well, the thing is, I just think it's counterintuitive. On one hand, he's obsessed with international defence. We must have international defence. Our defence spending must go up. Yet every single day, thousands of males from the Islamic Third World or the Third World are pouring into our country, unvetted, unchecked. They're causing chaos in our society. They're costing us tens of billions of pounds every year. And the people didn't even want it or ask for it. But we're getting it every single day. We don't want it. And we can see the decline and degradation in our society that mass immigration is causing.
You clearly care about immigration a lot. Let me just bring you back just for a second to Ukraine. Do you think, I mean, what should we do, if anything, in regard to Ukraine? Should we just abandon them? Should we just leave them to their own devices? Should we not be involved at all?
Well, I think if we had, us and the Americans and the Europe had left Ukraine to their own devices, they would have lost this war probably about 3 years ago. And they would have been sometimes, you know, I mean, as much as I don't like what Russia are doing, if Russia were trying to take over the UK and they were camped outside Epsom at the moment, I'd get myself a rifle and put my boots in the ground.
Okay.
But, I mean, really, what have we got? I don't even know a Ukrainian. I don't know a Russian. I don't, you know, unless you're directly linked, you know, what have we really got? I mean, I wish them well, and I wish them well. But I mean, ultimately, I've never even met a Ukrainian. I'm more concerned about the demise of my own society. The fact that our economy's going down the gurgler, immigration's destroying the place. That's what I'm more concerned about, Pete, to be honest.
Okay. Daniel, thanks for your thoughts there. Appreciate that. Neil says Starmer has said he's only loaned the money. How's he going to pay it back? Minerals. Trump was right, but shame it played out for the whole world to see, says this person. And Brittany from the USA says, I agree with you, Peter. I had never seen Trump that upset. The reason Trump let the cameras see what happened is because Trump promised to be transparent, and that is what he did. Stuart says, what if Putin invades Britain by rubber boats? We are completely defenceless. Davy Reese says, I am totally disgusted with Trump and Vance. They acted just like schoolyard bullies. I just hope the next bullet does go through his head. Goodness. Okay, well, we certainly don't want that to happen, Davy, and we don't want anybody to lose their life, least of all the President of the United States. Jason in Hastings says, hi Peter, great show as always. I get this argument between Zelensky and Trump, but Trump is correct to some degree. As wrong as it is, I think Trump is going to have to appease Russia to some extent. The nuclear threat to the entire world far outweighs land in Ukraine. Zelensky is gambling with World War III, and I'm glad Donald Trump has pointed this out. Final one from Gareth before the break, who says, I really believe that the chat in the Oval Office and the Vance speech is the US making Europe start paying their way for the defence of Europe, and in the background getting peace sorted. Lots of very interesting opinions. We're going to continue talking about this between now and 1, but we're also going to talk to Philip Kisely about a new scheme by the government. It's only £5 million, which is not a lot of government spending, it must be said, but this is to fund the deployment of specialist frontline staff to 80 jails, speeding up the removal of prisoners who have no right to be in the country. Will it work? Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch on Twitter. Rosie says, I agree wholeheartedly with James, who spoke a bit earlier on. Ukraine will not win the war. Trump is the man to negotiate. Zelensky running to Starmer has made matters worse. Thank you to Les, who says, Zelensky is like Oliver Twist. Can I have some more, please? When is enough? Never enough. Doherty J, Julie, says, no, it isn't showing good leadership. Ukraine is as corrupt as Russia. I'm glad Meloni has showed up. I wish she was our leader. So some thoughts there. Lots of people getting in touch. And we'll take more of your calls, texts, tweets, voice notes, smoke signals, and telepathic messages between now and 1 o'clock. But first we're going to speak to Philip Kisely, who is a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum. Hi Philip, how are you doing?
Hi, Peter. It's great to see you again.
There's a few things I want to talk to you about, actually, and Trump is one of them. But before then, foreign national offenders are going to be deported quicker. This is a news story today. This is a £5 million government investment, they call it. It's never investment, it's always spending in prisons across England and Wales. A new crack squad, we are told by the Ministry of Justice, will support the Home Office to identify and manage those going through the immigration process, ensuring cases are processed and the removal of prisoners who have no right to be in this country will be faster. Have you got faith in this to help to get those prisoners out of our prisons and back to their own countries, Philip?
Well, I think, first of all, you said before, Peter, that the amount of money being spent on this, and it is an investment, it's a spending, it isn't an investment, is £5 million, and it's nowhere near enough. So I think, no, I don't have a huge amount of faith in it. I'm kind of slightly perturbed by the language. A crack squad sounds a little bit farcical to me. I've got visions of Dell and Rodney dressed as
Batman and Robin, yeah.
Robin, you know, it's that kind of thing. So is this a serious, credible plan as they're saying it is? No, I don't think it is. And Peter, this is why, really. Okay, we've got well over 10,000 foreign criminals.
Yeah, they make up more than 12% of the total prison population. And the idea to get them out would certainly save money. I mean, this can't be a bad thing, can it?
No, it can't. Anything's a good thing. We're in such a terrible situation that, you know, as far as crime, policing, and the dealing with crime, the planes crashed into the mountain. But each one of these foreign criminals costs the taxpayer £50,000 a year. It's staggering. Okay, it costs us £50,000 a year to house these people in foreign prisons. And we're throwing £5 million at it. That just isn't going to work. But I don't think even just about the population in prisons. I think it's about 15,000 foreign criminals who are living in communities across Britain despite being eligible for deportation. There is your problem. Right there. That needs hundreds of millions of pounds throwing at it. That's where the danger is to the British public, and the government, as far as I can see, are doing precisely nothing about that. And I say 15 million foreign criminals living in British communities. Is probably much higher than that. That's just an estimate.
I should say that on this scheme, the Prisons Minister, Lord Timpson, says it cannot be right for British taxpayers to foot the bill for jailing foreign criminals who have brought misery to our communities. Under this government, removals are up by nearly 20%. We're now taking action to ensure this is done more swiftly, easing pressure on overcrowded prisons and on the public purse. This is part of our plan for change, fixing the broken prison system we inherited and keeping our streets safe. The investment, it's spending, it's not investment, it's spending, will create 82 specialist rules to oversee removals from jails. They will be in post and fully operational by the 1st of April, says Lord Timpson. Listen, this is a fascinating thing in terms of how we fix our prisons, certainly, Philip, but I mean, just a final thought on that before we move on to Trump, perhaps.
Well, I think there needs to be. It mustn't be an add-on. This is an add-on, an afterthought. You know, a crack squad. That kind of thing never works. All that does is signal to the British public that everything is totally broken and we have no real remedy for it. So we're just going to put a sticking plaster over the problem and engage in a spin and PR exercise, and then we'll move on to the next thing. It'll be something else next week. So that's what I think about it.
Philip, I want to ask you your thoughts on Trump, on Zelensky, on Starmer. First, your reaction to what happened on Friday. People are still reacting to it. People are still taking it in, seeing it. Some people watching the whole thing, making their mind up as a result of that. Others seeing snippets, hearing bits on the news and so on. It really has been what the world has been talking about for the last couple of days.
Well, you know, I've been around a long time and I've been talking about politics a long time. I literally have never seen anything like that in my life, okay? Trump's little bit at the end where he said, you know, this will make great television. Yeah, you're not kidding.
Yeah.
But it was quite alarming to see. I mean, first of all, I've never seen, I was watching it, and I don't know about you, Peter, but as I was watching it and as I was listening to Trump speak, I was thinking about a cross between The Godfather and Goodfellas. You know, this is not nice. You don't
respect me, respect the family.
Exactly. There was all of that kind of stuff going on there. So as a spectacle, as a piece of performance, which it was because it was on television, I've never seen anything like that in terms of politics. In terms of the broader picture, in terms of the terrible situation we've got in Europe, and in terms of Ukraine and Russia, of course, it's incredibly complicated. But what we do need to do, and I understand totally that America wants to stop throwing hundreds of billions of pounds at this. So there does need to be some kind of resolution. The problem with real politics is that resolutions are always messy, and they are imperfect for both sides. Any kind of resolution is going to be completely imperfect for Ukraine, but this situation does need to begin to come to an end, because I'm seeing what Vance and Trump are saying, and they are simply not going to throw money at it anymore. So I think a deal needs to be made.
I should say, just on the screen, if you're watching, I'll describe it for the people who are listening on the radio. Keir Starmer has just arrived there at the Defence Summit. This is in London at Lancaster House, which is just beside St James's Palace, very near Buckingham Palace, so in the very, very central area of London there. He's standing at the door, presumably waiting for Zelensky to arrive. Starmer has just arrived in the last few minutes after a short journey from Downing Street. It's really sort of less than a mile or so, something around that anyway, at Lancaster House. He's convening this international summit. If you're watching on the screen, we can see him standing there, plenty of flags behind him of some of the nations that are taking part in this: Germany, Ukraine, the United Kingdom, of course, France, Canada, and I think that's the Swedish flag, I think there. So Starmer is looking in expectation. As soon as, I would imagine, Zelensky arrives, we will... Sorry, it's the Finnish flag. Apologies, I got my Scandinavian nations mixed up there. But at this summit, we'll keep that a little bit on the screen just for people who are watching. I wonder, Philip, what you think should come out of this summit, or what's realistic to come out of this summit. And apologies in advance, I may have to interrupt you just if Zelensky arrives in the next couple of minutes.
Okay, I think if we look at what has been happening over the last couple of days, I think diplomacy and an understanding of the broader context should be front and centre for Keir Starmer here. Yes, I can understand his sympathy for Ukraine, but he must also bear in mind that we need the US as our major partner here, especially because we are removed in many ways from Europe. So I think he needs to be sensible. I think he needs to handle himself well behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera. Unfortunately, I don't have much faith in him to do that. So I'm very worried about this, because what I've seen over the last few days from Starmer, from Zelensky, from pretty much everybody is them throwing out...
Sorry to interrupt you there. We just see that a armoured car has arrived, and President Macron has arrived at Lancaster House. He's being saluted there by some of the officers there, and he is just going up to the front of it and shaking hands and embracing Keir Starmer. Various journalists throwing questions at him there. Of course, Macron, a key ally. Let's see if we can hear this. They're really not saying anything. They're touching each other on the back and going into Lancaster House. So there's President Macron of France there, who has arrived at Lancaster House, where that summit is taking place. Sorry, Philip, finish your thought there.
Yeah, it's just this... The playing out. I'm just going back to the Friday footage, because it was just so incredible. The playing out of all of these grievances in front of the camera. I almost felt like Zelensky was a stroppy teenager trying to show his parents up at a dinner party. It had that kind of feel to it, and you just cannot do that with Trump and Vance. So I hope that Starmer looks at that and understands the difficulty of his relationship with the US at the moment.
Yeah, it is very, very difficult, and it'll be interesting to see how that is in any way dealt with and perhaps ameliorated in some way. Philip, thank you. Never enough time, as always. Philip Kisley there. He's a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum. We'll keep an eye on what's happening at Lancaster House. Of course, that's all behind closed doors, unlike what happened on Friday. We'll take plenty more calls and messages as well, right up to 1 o'clock here on Talk.
I don't like the way that he's been leading the country, and I didn't particularly admire him much as leader of the opposition. But I'll tell you what, we do need a strong relationship with the United States, and whatever he's daftly said about presidential candidates in the past, it's good that he's got over his own well, how can I put it, his own personal views, and is representing us in
but is there not also a reflective moment on that? And I take your point, and I understand that, you know, if it's Team Britain that we're on,
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's hear a voice note from Barry.
Hello, Talk team. I'm going to say something very short and sweet. Well, maybe not so sweet, but why should we fight for this country when it's already been invaded? You know, will it make a lot more difference if a few more Russians pile in?
Very interesting point there. We've got a call now, 03444991000, from Martin in Cambridge. Martin, hello.
Hello, Peter.
I must sincerely apologise on behalf of this station and indeed this company, because you have been grossly libelled by our producer Chris. I've heard that he referred to you as not just Martin, but Starmer. he was talking to me on the phone and he called you Starmer rather than Martin.
Oh, I'm just recovering from the shock.
Well, I'm glad you have. What point would you like to make?
Well, basically, I saw Starmer on the telly. I mean, he was obsequious to the point of vomit-inducing. I mean, it's utterly pathetic. But what's basically happened, I think, is in the old days, in the 80s and the 70s when I grew up, you had big issues and you had big politicians. You obviously had the Iron Curtain coming down. You had Cold War and all the rest of it. And I think over the last 20 years, there's not really been anything big. So you've ended up with minor issues and minor politics take over. And it's such as the transit. You know, we all know what all those things are. So you've ended up with politicians who are pygmies. Now, I think now big politics has come back. So we need the Thatchers. We need the Keith Joseph.
Where are they, Martin? Where are they?
Well, we haven't got any. That's the problem. But at the moment, we need them. And what my point is basically is that Britain's in a really good position. I mean, we've always been the bridge between America and Europe. That's always been our historical position. And I think now we can play on that. I mean, we can get a trade deal with Trump, but also we've got the Europe by the short and danglies. And what my point is, but we want Northern Ireland back. We want our fishing grounds back. We want you to stop illegal immigration. Okay. We want a proper trade deal. If you don't, you're on your own.
Okay.
And we've got to play hardball, you know. But also, we've got the society's breaking down. Young people, there are a lot of young people don't know what they're doing, and they've got wasted lives. And I think we need to go on a war footing. I think we need to spend more money on defence. I think we need to stop all this DEI nonsense. I think we need to...
I mean, Keir Starmer would say he is spending a lot more money on defence. He's just increased the defence budget to 2.5% of what the country makes.
Yes, I know, Peter. And half of that will go on bureaucrats, and the other half will get lost on procurement, which should be badly designed projects that nobody knows what's going on. So we need 4% of GDP on defence. Maybe even 5%. We need to get rid of benefits. We need to get rid of these millions of people not contributing into society. Okay. We need to go on a national war footing, and we need to turn this country around. And it's a prime opportunity to do it, but we need the politicians to stand up. And like I say, Starmer's a waste of space.
Okay, thank you, Martin, who's definitely not called Starmer. Stephen is in the same part of the world, in Cambridgeshire. Stephen, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. Like I said to the researcher, I cannot understand why, if there's one millionaire or billionaire left in Ukraine, our money is being given to them.
Yeah, I mean, I can sense that, but why should private citizens necessarily have to pay for the defence?
Well, it's their country.
Well, yeah, it is, and I'm sure tax comes out of that, and that's absolutely fine. But if our country was at war, would all your money have to go to the defence services?
Yeah, but the point is, we're giving them billions of pounds that we haven't got. Allegedly, we got a black hole.
Yeah.
And Starmer's writing checks like it's going out of fashion.
I totally get the principle of giving money to Ukraine and whether we should actually do that or not, especially when there are priorities at home, Stephen. I mean, how much, if any, support do you think we should give Ukraine? What's your view on this?
Well, as much as is necessary, but like you're saying about them being private citizens, they're not going to be private citizens if Russia get a foothold there, are they?
Yeah, that's true, but still, I mean, whether private citizens should actually pay more, I mean, taxation's always high during wartime as well. It's an interesting point, Stephen, but I'm not sure I entirely agree with you, but thanks for your call. Bridget is in Suffolk and has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Bridget, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, I think Starmer should keep out of it and keep well away. He's causing British now between us.
Well away from what? Well away from Ukraine, Bridget?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because as he said, Mr. Trump said he's fed up seeing young boys come home in body bags.
Although, actually, with that in mind, Bridget, sorry to interrupt you, I mean, Starmer may say that this summit today that's happening at the moment is actually something that may end the conflict, may actually bring peace or help move things along.
Well, I hope that it will be, but where Starmer's concerned, I don't think he does anything good.
You don't think he's shown any leadership in the last couple of days, Bridget?
No. He's a waste of space, concerned. Okay. And I think I've got to think of going in the army. And the last thing I want him is to be sent over there, because at the moment Ukraine are short of men.
Yeah, that's true.
What happens when these final, thousands of boys are then dead? And Starmer spoke, he wants national service back. Is that some sort of prelude to young men?
I don't think he wants national service, Bridget. Certainly that was a policy of the Conservatives previously, but
Starmer has said it, because I've heard him say it, and he said they were given the trade, we will train them.
In a slightly different way, but yeah, okay, interesting.
Yes, he did.
Okay.
So, and I listened to all the radio programmes.
Okay.
Nothing is said about this, and I do not want any more sacrificial men being sent over, or even Ukraine men. And I bet there was a lot of people there thinking in Ukraine they want peace.
Yeah, well,
I work with a couple of girls from Ukraine, and they've told me there's no more young men.
Okay. Bridget, thank you for your thoughts there. Kevin in Cheshire says, let's answer the basics of the Trump-Zelensky meeting. Why was Zelensky meeting Trump? He was there to sign the deal. Rubio and Zelensky agreed the deal in Ukraine. He was told there would be no US troops on the ground as a backstop, as Zelensky insisted as part of the deal. Rubio asked Zelensky to sign the deal in Ukraine, but Zelensky insisted he fly to the US to sign it with Trump. When he got there, he insisted on US troops on the ground, knowing he had already been told no, says Kevin in Cheshire. Lisa says, Starmer is loving all the attention, making him look relevant and revelling in the leaders from Europe coming to see him. It is sickening, says Lisa. Perhaps he's trying to help. What do you think? We've got a few more minutes to go. Gareth is in Derbyshire. Gareth, what would you like to say?
Good morning, Peter. Nice to speak to you.
And you too.
Yeah, I'm just trying to read the room of what's happened here, because I want to be a little bit careful that we're not having our pants taken down. Because from what I've seen, Donald Trump wants Europe to police the border between Russia and Ukraine. But Donald Trump wants to have all the minerals, but he doesn't want to put his soldiers in between those two armies.
I mean, he would argue, wouldn't he, Gareth, that actually they've given loads of money already and they're owed it back by Ukraine.
Well, let's just wait a minute. If it's about money, I think we've given quite a lot, and apparently we've just committed some more. Now, the other thing is, straight after that, of course, he's thrown Zelensky down the Niagara Falls, but Starmer comes back and announces that he wants to assemble a coalition of the willing. Now, I presume he means that he wants to ask France and Germany if they want to be part of this solution.
Yeah, I think France might. Certainly, if there's to be a peacekeeping force, that's certainly what Starmer is after or thinking about anyway.
So when we ask Europe for things like a free trade deal perpetually, they say, well, you're not part of the European Union. But if they want us to be part of their European army to police Russia and Ukraine, they'll ask us willingly to go along. Well, do you think, first of all, do you think he ought to ask the British people if they want to send our troops?
Well, it's his decision and it's Parliament's decision, Gareth, if that were to actually happen. But very interesting points there from Gareth. Let's see if we can just squeeze in a final voice note from Danny here. He has a question to pose.
The question nobody is asking, Peter. What is Zelensky's endgame to all this? Does he want to roll over and take over Russia until Putin is killed? It makes him no better than that man himself. This is how dictators are born. This is how wars are started. What is Zelensky's endgame? That is the ultimate question.
Well, it's a very interesting question, Danny, but I don't think Zelensky